Hello and welcome to another episode of Lore Ramblings and the penultimate version for this book. I'm Adam.
And I'm Tech Priest, and this is, well, probably the setting that sold a lot of people on this book, at least as a concept.
Well, I mean, think about it like
Oh,
this: the world of
and
darkness is a very kind of thriller-esque setting, and
yes,
what
and we
better?
have been joined by a third person.
Because
Literally
it's
the last minute.
thriller night, and no one's gonna save you from the mist that's gonna strike. Because it's thriller
You might want
night.
to
They're
stop
fighting
because
for
the
your life. It's
YouTube
gonna
algorithm
thriller,
legit
killer
throws.
tonight.
You are aware that YouTube legitimately does interpret people singing, even if it's their own covers, right?
Let's be let's. My voice is so gargled right now. I doubt I'm considered a
Oh, you could be
recognizable
shocked at how
voice.
good AI is at trying to find that moolah, that spindoli.
So what you're saying is they'll make some artistic interpretations.
Oh yeah. By the way, that's Greg for everyone concerned.
Ugh.
I'm pretty concerned right
Yeah,
now, I can tell you that.
sorry, I was a bit late.
It's not
Nah,
that you
it's
were a bit
totally
late,
fine.
you just,
You literally showed up right on time, which is amazing.
Oh, right on time? Cool.
yeah, we just started.
Ugh.
Uh,
You might thrill a dice, come on. By the way, a beautiful comment from Silver Grizzly is Gorbachev's birthmark infrastructure. That's a
no.
mis- That's a
Infrastructure's a
mystery.
little more, well, a little more,
Less fleshy.
yeah. Like,
Uh,
infrastructure usually isn't people.
A little less. I said it's a little less, but it can be degree of fleshy, just not literally flesh.
like to give you an idea, infrastructure is usually just like maybe not Gorbachev's birthmark, but there might be a little bit sewn into his tie. Like the clothing that he's wearing in his wardrobe, or the wardrobe itself might be infrastructure.
Oh, I just love the most cursed demon infrastructure idea. Can you imagine the poor demon who chose his infrastructure to be the Chernobyl power plant?
Well, they're just screaming again and again, incessantly.
Well, you see, what
And
happened was Chernobyl was just a catastrophic glitch. Oh God, I shouldn't have said that. So into the cold. A wall is a hell of a lot better than war. John F. Kennedy, upon hearing about the construction of the Berlin Wall, in about 8 seconds before getting shot by 5 different conspiracies at once.
Yeah. I mean, the opening fiction is literally a dude crossing the wall and then getting fucking murked by somebody he considered a friend because what he knew could simply not be let for him to know.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good. That's actually probably one of the better opening pieces. And here's a little bit to show that. It's one of the better opening pieces to get you into that mindset.
Yeah, that this is a very, very specific time period in Berlin. Namely the 60s.
Ah, yes, the Berlin blockade crisis periods.
No, this is after that. The
Ah,
the blockade had
we're
been
the
way later.
50s, yeah.
This is around, well, the construction of the Berlin Wall is really what starts this.
So the Cold War it remains possibly the most terrifying period in human history. Certainly the first to pose an existential danger not to just one nation but to the entire world. I guess they aren't aware of the time humanity almost died out. What was it, 70,000 years ago?
That's a maybe. There's just a genetic bottleneck, which could just be about anything, honestly.
also in all fairness, humanity probably, not counting the Gestalt hive mind that is the human consciousness. I don't think humanity itself realized how close to the brink it was probably at that time.
Yeah.
Due to the wonders of modern technology, we all know exactly how close to the abyss we all sit constantly.
Oh yeah, it was about 2,000 people who survived the bottlenecking incident. And due to geological dating and
We know it's around
stratification,
the Tonga eruption, yes. Now, that's a big theory. We don't actually have any true evidence of that. In any case, the
it's
main.
mostly just timing, similar to the hypothesis that the dinosaurs got wiped by an asteroid, which, don't get me wrong, the asteroid probably finished it off because we did find it, and the layer of iridium makes a pretty good case.
The
There's a
layer of
KT
iridium
boundary.
globally makes a huge case where we don't see dinosaur fossils after that.
But the problem is they always forget about the Deccan Flats eruptions, which also
Well,
did
the
a lot of
Deccan,
damage.
but yeah, the Deccan Flats eruption could possibly be involved, but
Well,
it's
no,
definitely not
it's
the.
current archaeology basically thinks what happened was the Deccan Flats started the decline. The asteroid just sped run any percent the remainder.
Well, the Deccan Flats eruption would have resulted probably in a minor mass extinction. Then the asteroid hits.
Hey, buddy, I heard you're going through a minor extinction crisis. Let's make it 1,000 times worse! Slams into the Yucatan at maximum velocity, causes a tsunami like a mile tall.
It isn't just that. The asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs was a fucking global firestorm. Uh,
I think
unironically,
everything within a couple hundred miles instantly burst into flames. Yeah.
it wasn't just that, but like even globally, it would have caused some firestorms because of atmospheric ignition in some areas. It was an absolute nightmare to be anywhere in that hemisphere.
Gorbachev wasn't Pizza Hut and Louis Vuitton commercials. That might be infrastructure.
That might be infrastructure. Those commercials might be infrastructure, but the birthmark is not. Anyway,
The Gorbachev was fake. It was actually an angel
but yeah,
duplicating him.
the thing to remember about this, and especially the early Cold War, is that we really didn't quite know what sort of level of destruction we were dealing with. In a theoretical sense, we did. However, the people on the ground had lived through the Second World War in the decision making. So a lot of them, especially people like MacArthur, tended to view nukes as just really big bombs.
Which, to be
They
fair,
are,
they are.
but the difference is on the scale of the usage, right?
It took, I think, a couple 100,000. What was it? I don't think it was 100,000. It took tens of thousands of bombs to firebomb Tokyo to the same level one did to
Kyoto.
Hiroshima.
Like the Tokyo fire bombings was a perfect storm, right? Like it had the perfect area to use a massive amount of fire bombs in order to cause maximum devastation. But to do it, you still had to do a massive air raid.
Yeah, it took, what was it, a couple tens of thousands of bombs to do it.
Yeah,
Nuke,
Mm-hmm.
one.
just
As
one
as
bomb.
well as
One
as well as
bomber
the
gets
fact
through, and that's a city gone, or a
as
large
well as the
chunk of it.
as well as the fact that people more or less generally agree that if you in the escalation principle, if you escalate, I'll escalate right back because I have no choice at that point.
And by
Yes,
this point, the Soviets had their hands on a pretty decent-sized nuclear stockpile, courtesy of a
They
mixture of their own
yeah.
internal scientific cities, as well as the fact that they stole a lot of the basic details on how to construct them, thanks to the Cambridge Five, as well as other spies.
it was
Yeah,
mostly the Cambridge
it's
Five that managed to get their hands on information. The the U.S. executed 2 people over it, but they were probably tangential at best when we look into the evidence. They were the last officially U.S. citizens executed for treason, which was in I think 1948.
Last I checked, weren't they? Wasn't their execution botched too? Because like, didn't they intentionally not wet the? Because they were killed by electric chair. I think they intentionally did not wet the things attached to their heads.
I
Like
don't know
it
if
was,
that's
from what I understand, their execution was a big shit show.
yeah. In any case, the nuclear proliferation across Europe and the United States was a big cause of concern for a lot of people and a lot of planners.
There's also another concern. See, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, these were done by earlier designs for essentially
Yeah,
early fission bombs.
20 KT nukes. Do you know what we call a 20 kiloton nuke now?
Rookie numbers.
Tactical.
It's it's tactical. We're trying to minimize.
It's on the larger end of tactical nuclear weapon deployment. Like I'd say about anything below 25 kilotons is technically speaking capable of being used tactically because it can wipe out an entire formation. The real fun comes from our good friend the megaton. This is what people started switching to the second the hydrogen bomb was figured out by a crazy man And
Teller
it's
and
still
well, actually, it was two. It was
it was
Teller
Teller and someone else. Teller was an
I
absolute
can go big.
and
magnet.
I can
Erie.
go bigger. I can go bigger.
Teller and Erie. If you're wondering, you're not even reminded there because there were two or three new bomb creation types. Hydrogen bomb, which has even more stockpile and fuel. Then there was just building bigger ones. But there's one other one that in particular is just war crimes waiting to happen because around this time they also designed the concept of a neutron bomb. Which, if you're
Yeah,
wondering what a
neutron
neutron bomb
bombs.
is,
They don't exactly make a large explosion. What instead they do is that they bombard everything with alpha and beta waves. So it basically kills anything living through microwave radiation.
and you know the shitpost concept of the early Hulk origins where they're inventing the gamma bomb.
That's the idea behind it, because gamma radiation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bruce Banner was creating a legitimate war crime explosive.
yeah.
Oh, the
The
comics tried to justify it saying, "Oh no, it only destroys metals and material." No,
No, it wouldn't have. It's the exact
no,
opposite.
it would cleanse all life in the area.
Yeah, that's the other thing with Fallout was the other thing that they weren't expecting. The effects of Fallout on areas and lingering
Unironically, this is
radiation.
only a few years after John Wayne got his ass destroyed by cancer because he filmed at a bomb test site and all the smoking.
Yeah,
Fallout through the Fallout.
We don't know if it
Baby.
was the smoking or the fallout from the test site when he was at the Conqueror, where he played
yeah,
Genghis Khan, because of course he
yeah.
did.
They casted him as Genghis Khan, which is the it's the most it's the most baffling movie casting choice I can think of,
He was
honestly.
famous. No, it
I
makes
mean,
complete sense.
yes, but
He was
it's
famous.
fucking Genghis Khan. You couldn't get Charlton Heston for that?
No,
Like I could believe Charlton Heston is a fucking Mongolian war leader. He did a great job in El Cid.
no,
Uh,
But the tech you don't see. A Mongol is a guy that rides a horse. John Wayne is a cowboy who rides a horse. Ergo, cowboys are Mongols and Mongols are cowboys. Ergo, John Wayne is the perfect guy to play Genghis Khan. You need to understand. You need to get in the loop.
you're getting
Snort
quieter
a few
there.
more lines of coke. Snort a few more lines of coke.
well, you need to get a little closer to your mic, first of all, but second of all, yeah, that's about right. That does
That's
sound
probably the logic.
exactly.
Yeah, that sounds like Hollywood logic right there.
Think about
Producer logic,
think about it
especially.
like this. We could have had, well, probably not since he was a B movie actor, but it would have been hilarious for Reagan to play Genghis Khan. The beheadings will begin in 5 minutes.
So, the
Let's
in
get
general, the nuclear paranoia of this time is fantastic, and it also resulted in a bunch of weird and wacky weaponry, including something my great uncle worked on, which was the idea of nuclear-powered jet bombers, not nuclear-carrying nuclear jet bombers, but like nuclear-powered jets.
Oh yeah,
He
because during the 50s, the U.S. See, here's the thing. Besides the bomb, most of the scientists involved in Manhattan realized if we can make a sustainable reaction, this could also make a very effective power plant.
Yes,
And the army was like, wait, we don't have to use things like fuel and supply. No, you do. You have to use reactor rods and coolant systems,
but you
but
only
we
have to change
don't
them out
have to
every like
carry
10
all this
years.
fucking gas.
Exactly. So there were proposals for nuclear tanks. The only nuclear real war machines that ever became popular was the whole was nuclear submarines at first, then larger nuclear surface ships.
And that's because
Uh,
the Navy managed to slurp up most of the budget because they could justify, especially as studies came further and further into how shielding works. Yeah, you see, our ships are really big,
Ships
so
are big. Ships are also relatively resistant to radiation, as proven by Crossroads. So if something does go wrong, we can just decontaminate the ship if we have to. Try
yeah,
decontaminating
we can
a
store it.
tank.
So give us money, Pentagon.
It's also that there was this one admiral, fantastic guy, Hyman G. Rickover, who um, he drank a reactor's coolant water in front of a congressional committee to prove a point, which is
And the
that this
point
shit is
was,
safe.
Oh, I thought you said it was to prove he was hardcore.
Well, that too. The man saw the appeal of a nuclear submarine and wanted it. He wanted it so fucking bad
If you're wondering why
because
a nuclear submarine is so good, okay, so think about it like this. See, diesel subs have they make noise, which is
It's not the noise issue. Diesel subs are actually quieter. The main
They
thing
can be quite quiet, but
is
they still have to occasionally surface.
that's what I was about to say, is that they have to go to the surface in order to recharge their batteries, because they have to run their diesel engines in order to do so, which is louder than you'd expect, and well, they need to have a snorkel up and all that, and it's a bit of a pain in the ass, and it's a time where they're relatively vulnerable. Meanwhile, a nuclear submarine doesn't have to. They can generate their own oxygen through breaking down seawater if they have to, so they can remain underwater relatively indefinitely. And
Also,
only really
nuclear power engine is even quieter.
it's relatively quieter. It's a lot quieter than a diesel when you're running that. So yeah.
So what happened was Admiral Rickover, he decided to chug an entire bottle of reactor water in front of Congress.
At a hearing to prove the point that no, this was indeed safe, and we can do this. It'll be fine. He lived to a ripe old age and did not die of cancer. So yeah,
He got the last laugh. Meanwhile, the Army and Air Force projects, I don't know how far the Air Force won, but the Army...
Air Force ones, okay, the Air Force ones got into the prototype stages. The Air Force ones got into roughly prototypes of, can we put a reactor on a plane, which is what they did with a B-36, and my personal favorite stuff, nuclear rocket technology and jet technology, which they did tests of. This is Project Pluto. And Project Pluto also had a few other crazier application ideas, but Pluto in general was about, okay, how do we make nuclear rocket technology work?
Because think about it like this. So you have a thing called delta V in impulses. That's how long you can shoot your rocket. While nuclear engines may not necessarily last forever because you need a propellant, that is still the thing you need for rockets. They're a lot more efficient. Hilariously, they are a lot more efficient than traditional
Chemical
reactant,
rockets, yes.
chemical
Like,
rocketry.
because they convert mass to energy much more efficiently. The only issue
Unironically,
is
we came
cooling.
pretty damn far. We came pretty damn far, but what
We came
really...
pretty damn far, and we proved that this is viable technology that we can build. It's just that we kind of looked at it and it's like, okay, so it works. It's really efficient. What happens if something goes wrong while we're launching something into space? And that's where everybody sat down and went, okay, yeah, no, we really can't use these. Because a high atmosphere burst of that, and you've got, you irradiate half a continent, possibly. There's a few other issues with it in terms of, well, they get really hot, like really, really hot.
Which is not good in space, by the way, because space does not really allow you to
Space does not
distribute
allow
heat
the venting
easily.
of heat very easily. So you'd have to put on extra mass and extra weight. So it's still more efficient. It's like, this is something that we want to use when we're already in space.
Yeah.
Which is another way to look at it, where you could have a second stage. I think this is some part of the Mars plans, I think, at several points, where can we use a second stage of a nuclear thermal rocket?
Which legitimately would work pretty well.
It would.
What really killed
again,
it, though, was a courtesy of Soviet agitprop.
Not at all, actually. It's that the applications that we found out for these things
Also, the budget
are
got
very
cut anyway.
limited. The budget was getting cut anyway because first off, everybody was kind of there were a lot of applications for it, but by about 59, everyone was looking at like the nuclear powered rockets and nuclear jet engines with, ICBMs are on the horizon.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
That's the big thing.
Yeah.
Because the original plans for these nuclear powered bombers, at least according to my great uncle, was that they would be a high flying, basically they'd fly above the range of any possible interception, and they could just be up there for days. No problem.
To give you an idea, if you've ever heard of the Avro Vulcan, that was their concept as well, the British concept. Yes. They were a nuclear bomber. Legitimately, they were specialized. They were only supposed to be cracked out essentially during World War III.
Their entire purpose was to go and nuke the Soviets in Germany.
And they were not supposed. And here's how dire the Vulcan project was. Every pilot that was trained on the Avro Vulcan was taught to use an eye patch.
Yeah, because they were expecting that they'd be seeing nuclear detonations, so that they couldn't be blinded completely.
legitimately, that's the situation, and that's the understanding of how dire World War III would have been. There's a reason. This quote's attributed to Einstein. I don't know if he actually said it.
Like the I don't know what weapons World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones is
Yeah,
basically the gist of it. Which again, it's just sort of a comment that yeah, this shit is incredibly destructive on a civilizational level, which is.
and now we got
But
hundreds of them.
and now we've got not hundreds, thousands,
Oh yeah, by this
thousands of
point we've gotten to
thousands of them.
thousands.
And oh yeah, a lot of these are also small and on the tactical level. Because we get the really fun concepts like the chicken warmed up nuclear landmine that the British tried to develop for a short time.
My favorite's the Davy Crockett nuclear bazooka.
You got the Davy
The
Crockett.
what? Wait, hold on. You get the Fat Man in real
hi,
life?
Imsit. Yes, the
Hi.
Davy Crockett was a recoilless rifle with a relatively small
Well,
warhead.
calling it a rifle is a bit of an
Well, a
over.
recoilless rifle is the proper term for it.
Because
Yeah,
it's basically an upgunned anti-tank rifle.
Designed to fire this Davy Crockett warhead. And you are not guaranteed to be outside the blast radius when you fire that thing. And certainly not outside of the radiation exposure limit. There's also the wonderful, wonderful nuclear demolition charges, also known as the green light teams, that were going to be smuggled into Soviet territory in case of World War III, and also were all over West Germany. These were U.S. Army teams that were supposed to basically plant atomic detonation charges on critical infrastructure to ensure destruction.
So the Call of Duty Cold War game was accurate?
Yes, the green light
More
teams
accurate
were,
than you think.
Yeah, the green light teams were an actual thing. It was essentially groups of like 2 or 3 men who were tasked with long-term infiltration into enemy territory and then detonating nuclear charges. Supposedly these are on a timer long enough for them to go off and get away, but there was always rumors among the green light teams that they were not in fact on a timer.
Or yeah,
to ensure
they couldn't be sure.
Detonation. Yeah.
And Vulcan pilots would have been rad. They have to look like Snake Plissken.
Yeah.
No, they would just kind of look like your average Air Force guy with an eye patch.
The other thing with
probably
that is
severe
that
sunburn on half of their face.
Speaking of other fun nuclear weapons, there is my personal favorite, the nuclear depth charge, which is an actually efficient use of a nuclear weapon, surprisingly enough.
There's a reason this one actually came very close to being used.
Yes, it came very close to being used during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The fun thing about the nuclear depth charge is that because of how water works and how a nuke works, the force of the explosion is relatively contained by the water. The water pressure is much heavier than air, so it creates a big giant spherical bubble, right? Because it vaporizes that water instantly, and then it all collapses in on itself like a normal depth charge, but it's a much larger effect.
Also, another really useful factor is that water is what you call a neutron deflector, a neutron absorber.
Yes.
So
it doesn't
sucks up most of the radiation.
So most of the radiation is basically gone. It's not going to cause any long-term effects in the nearby area unless you're setting off like 300 at once.
Or unless you're going full asshole and making a neutron-based depth charge nuke.
Yeah. In any case, they then also had a fun thing called the Genie. This is a U.S. invention. It was also loaned to the Canadians. Imagine, if you will, that you want to deal with a giant Soviet bomber formation. How do you do this?
Fucking thing.
So one of the ideas is the 2.5-inch rockets, because we realized that these rockets could be used to shoot down bombers because they are relatively high explosive. If you shoot them into what's considered like a kill box, because the bombers would usually fly in a big formation, so you flood the box with rockets, you're probably going to hit some and kill them, or cause enough damage that they're going to have to ditch. Therefore, there were a lot of rocket-armed interceptors that were experimented with by the United States. But the real king of this was the Genie. The Genie was a modified air-to-air missile that was equipped with a nuclear warhead. It was unguided with a timed detonation.
Because it didn't need to aim.
Basically, the Genie pilot had very specific instructions on how to fire this thing, which included, the helmet from Star Wars Episode 4, where Luke has that gets pulled down over his head. That was an actual helmet that these guys were issued, at least something similar, where they would put their plane in a lock autopilot, pull down the visor, fire, unlock, and go down. then they'd then perform a turn and uncover their eyes again, so they wouldn't get blinded. And the idea behind this is quite simple: bomber crews aren't likely going to be wearing, nuclear-proof shades. So even if you miss the formation, they're going to blind half of it, and they're just going to crash. And if it does hit the formation, it's going to instantly obliterate it. We had these in service up until the 80s.
Oh yeah. Some other projects that we had that haven't been mentioned yet includes the concept of a microreactor, SL1. The concept of that one was legitimately it's designed to be effectively portable. It's supposed to be the lightest reactor design, and it's supposed to be used in small military bases, primarily in northern Canada, in areas just where it's a pain in the ass to get infrastructure.
The Soviets also experimented with similar devices, and they actually used them for lighthouse batteries.
Which was pretty brain dead because the U.S. very quickly cottoned on because the design itself was flawed. One control rod, it only had 5. Control rods are usually these things made out of a mixture of graphite and other neutron absorbing and reflecting materials. A design that has only one rod be the essential master controller of it, bad design. Bad design.
What are you talking about? Something like that's impossible in the Soviet Union.
Oh, I meant in the U.S. because the SO1 reactor incident claimed the lives of 3 men by the time the project was over. And last but not least, there's also the nuclear tank project, which did not get as far as the Air Force because the Air Force managed to get a lot more money. Because that's how the Air Force do.
The Air Force tested the B-36 where they determined it can in fact be flown, but then they looked at it and what about the heat? What about the radiation? What about shielding? Long term.
Well, with the Chrysler concept, they got the mock-up done. They got the physical mock-up done. They did some initial looks at it, and then they wait a minute. Look at the fucking profile of this thing. What happens if it gets hit from the side from, say, like the equivalent of an RPG?
Yeah.
Oh, and that's why the Chrysler nuclear tank never got as far as the Air Force projects did.
They never got as far as practical testing because everybody sort of thought about it and went, this is really not a great idea.
They also made a nuclear train, but that one came farther, but the concept was what happens if it derails? I think they got as far as the actual prototype reactor design before they went, wait a minute.
So DP is asking, how does this relate to demons? Well,
to give you an idea of the culture.
Yeah, this is Cold War.
Yeah, this is sort of the world we're in, where it's like, yeah, the second that this war goes hot, it's a ticking time bomb before someone breaks out the TAC nukes, and the escalation ladder.
And once you break out the TAC nukes, you're at best looking at a situation similar to Twilight 2000, which, if you're wondering, that is a Wartop minis book that I think was made by I'm gonna get.
It's an RPG about being soldiers in the Third World War after everything's gone to fucking shit.
Yeah,
and you're
Europe
in the middle
is
of
not
Poland,
in great
and you
shape.
have to figure out a way to get home.
Yeah, and Europe's in horrible shape.
It's not Threads level bad, but it's still terrible.
But governments have basically collapsed because most of them got hit. Those that haven't collapsed are basically on the way to collapsing, and
your characters are Americans stuck probably either in Germany or Poland, and most likely do not know the language.
Poland or Sweden, and need to figure out a way to get home. Because as it turns out, like everyone, because all the governments are gone, a lot of more organized military units are basically turning into warlords. Because, well,
why wouldn't they?
Why the fuck else? What the fuck else can we do? Like, we need supplies. We need to keep doing this. There's no reason to keep fighting everyone, but like, it's still not great.
And so imagine if you, with all this paranoia of nuclear Armageddon, and now remember the demon's paranoia of, oh god, I'm going to be found out by the God Machine and destroyed.
Yes. Now, this also leads into the wonderful thing where it's like, most of us are probably too young to remember this, or we're dead before it happened. Not dead, not born before it happened. But we had there's a fantastic, symbol of the end of the Cold War is the Berlin Wall going down. Well, 1961 is the first year that the wall went up. and there was some international tension when it went up, but it wasn't as bad as what would happen very, very soon after, which was the Cuban Missile Crisis.
And technically, Berlin could have been the epicenter for the, I guess, World War III.
Berlin was very likely to be a spark. There was zero doubt in a lot of people's minds that Berlin would be probably the first place that hostilities could happen and then escalate into a third world war.
Oh yeah, if you're wondering, so all those concepts like there was the good German general in World War II and all, like the army was mostly clean.
The
Yeah,
army was clean. They totally did not participate. Yes, some units didn't. There are other units that were more than happy to shoot everyone.
Also, they're saying that's also like saying like no army has ever committed war crimes.
So the
Yeah.
reason they did this was precisely because they were the command, the U.S., the British, NATO itself, the prototype of NATO, I should say, early pre-NATO. The nations in the West realized there might be a war with the Soviets.
Not that there might be. They were pretty much thinking that it would have happened.
They'd not quite realized just how badly the Soviets were actually fucked from the war.
Yeah, because the Soviets also did a pretty good job at hiding this.
It's also that, quite frankly, there was zero chance in hell that the populations back home would have supported turning on the Soviets immediately.
Not after all that propaganda, but because
not after
of
all the
this,
propaganda, and not after a 6-year-long conflict.
But because of this, they went, well, shit. We need to make sure in the event a war does kick off with these fuckers, we can get the Germans on side. So a lot of bullshit and a lot of these assholes who really shouldn't have had the ability to write their own mythos got to write their own mythos. Looking at you, Guderian, you fuckstick.
That's not even getting into the propaganda. Yeah, that's where we get all the things like the German aristocratic officer stereotype.
Yeah, that's also where we get. It's also where we get the concept of like technical superiority, although that also is just due to the fact that like some bullshit, like actual bullshit,
and not actually having accurate information until.
No, we had accurate information. We were able to dissect and look at all of their vehicles. It's just, for some reason, I think it's because for defense budget reasons, it was a lot more fun to be able to lie about how our shit sucks compared to the Germans. Honestly, the German stuff, even in the early phase of the war, wasn't actually that much more advanced, if at all, than their Allied counterparts. They just knew how to use it better. Because the doctrines the Allies had were kind of dog shit except for what the British did, because the British actually came very close to mechanizing early. The only reason they actually were still more mechanized than the Germans. That's another thing. Oh yeah, armored blitzkrieg. No, they used a lot of fucking horses.
There were mechanized units, they just weren't the norm.
I think that probably was a lot of shock to how quickly the Germans advanced, because remember, the last World War, there was no advancing.
Oh, the shock was mainly just because. Okay, so here's the thing: when the German formation goes, officers, we have managed to break into this. We are continuing. The officer pretty quickly, because the Germans had a bunch of radios, were pretty quickly able to react to that. The French, by comparison, they understood the concept of radios, but they were mainly for officer commands, so information got to them a lot slower. It's not that the French soldiers sucked. I mean, some formations completely melted, which were trash, but it's more because the French, A, didn't have any reserves, and B, their information was a lot more dated. Because and as a result, they reacted slower. That's the biggest problem. Oh, and see, the Germans were on meth, so they were able to continue going for like 48 hours before crashing.
I wish I could go for 48 hours without crashing.
The secret solution was meth.
Partially. Fun fact, did you know that Erwin Rommel, the guy who managed to make his own myth, is a big dumb idiot who could have gotten killed here and in Africa because he was a big dumb idiot that kept fighting even though he had literally no fucking forces left? At any point, he could have gotten encircled and clapped.
That was his job. He was just very good at not having that happen to him, which
in all fairness, you know, the
He
thing,
was
the
he
line
was
between
also a
the
petty
line.
douchebag. His own officers were like, "What the fuck are you doing, soldier?" He responded by sulking and silently turning off his radio, pretending he had errors with it.
Yeah,
He's a
and
piece of shit.
like, can we get to Demon, because we did start a little late.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So, Imsit's also here too now.
So the scenario is this. We have established the basic concept of why this Cold War is going to be pretty bad if it ever gets hot, to the point where they had to essentially rebuild up these myths so that they could get the Germans on side. Soviets did a similar thing. That's why Eastern Germany really adopted the Wehrmacht look. Legitimately, it claimed to be
Yes,
the
part
successor
of the
state.
part of the thing. Yes, the reason why all of the East German uniforms and even their helmet design is all like late Wehrmacht stuff is entirely that they're trying to justify that no, we're the real Germany. They also then accused the other Germany of being the one that had all the Nazis, which wasn't quite wrong.
You know, one of the funniest things is, did you? Fun fact: did you know the East German national anthem is surprisingly optimistic?
Yeah, it is. East Germany is a weird little state.
It's sad because
Um,
if you didn't know what it was, if you just saw its anthems and shit, you could be like, I can understand I can understand, and then you realize what the fucking system was like, and you're like, oh no.
Hey, want more secret? What? Hey, remember how much fun it was under the Gestapo? Well, how about communist
How
Gestapo?
about the Stasi, which is like 5 times worse and about 20 times more competent?
yeah, like that's the thing.
Because they weren't super much worse. They were genuinely worse. But the problem was they were a lot more competent.
That was the thing. The Stasi were probably one of the most competent intelligence services of any of the major powers.
They had to be.
And
They had to put a lot of
they had to be.
resources into it because people kept running
Yeah,
away. Why are you running away from our glorious dumpster fire?
yeah.
The Stasi, the, the Gestapo without the Nazism.
So, and
No,
this leads up to the 60s. Basically, people in East Germany are like, holy shit, we could stay here, or we drive potato
yeah.
car, or
In the
survive
first
on trash, or we can run to the west.
in the first about 15 years that East Germany was around, about 3 million people got out of East Germany into Western Germany, which was about 20% of the population. The reason for this was pretty simple. It was not going very well in East Germany. The Soviets were taking a lot of the industry out of the country in order to rebuild their
Cannonballs.
own,
Yeah, that's understandable.
which again is kind of understandable because the mentality that the Soviets had is we really need to punish these fucks for this whole thing.
No, the mentality
Wait,
is,
wait, wait,
ooh,
wait.
it's ours now, yoink.
Also
Oh,
that,
wait.
but it's a lot of it is that this is their version of this is reparations. We're taking everything.
To be
Wait, so
fair,
this
other parts of Europe did the same thing, France in particular.
Yes.
so this is another time where Russians take property and resources from a foreign country and push it towards their center.
Hey, don't poop on the Soviets for doing it. The Germans did it twice at this point.
I was about to say that
The
was just a
Germans have
general
all, or the
European.
Germans
That
were
was
also
The
doing this a
Germans
lot.
were notorious for doing this in both
I was
World
gonna say
War One and
that was
World
a
War
general.
Two.
That's a general European imperialist mindset in general.
Ah.
Just some countries haven't let go of that.
So, yeah, 20% of the population fled. In fact, actually, you can kind of see a current. You see, if you want a comparison to East Germany, North Korea is actually coming very close to being as effective as the Stasi were at preventing people from escaping. Seriously, they've perfected their border zones, so even escaping to China now will get you shot on sight. No one enters, no one can leave.
Yet no one realizes maybe we should just, instead of stopping people from leaving, stop people from wanting to leave.
That would mean giving up power.
Yeah,
Yeah. A
that's
lot of it
literally
was
why.
power, and it was also paranoia. Quite frankly, the entire leadership of these states was very paranoid about what the Soviets would do.
And for good reason,
Everyone was,
because if you're
for good
wondering,
reason.
so okay, to give you a concept onto why they were walling everything off with the Berlin Wall at this point, First off, 20% of your people leaving, that's a fuckload of people. That's a fuckload of brain drain. But what was much more concerning was just about 4 years prior, the Hungarians tried to actually reform their communism and start ignoring orders from Moscow. Their response was to be crushed horribly and hundreds of people being sent away to disappear forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the
You
Hungarian
gotta
uprising
remember.
of
You gotta remember. You gotta remember something.
1966.
For as much as a quote unquote grassroots project, as a lot of communists like to believe, believe in stuff like that. Most of the ideological, essentially, center is always held by a small select group of intelligentsia that believe they are the vanguard, that they are the
Well,
ones
that's
with all
the vanguard. That's the Marxist-Leninist vanguardism concept, which is
No, what the big problem was for not all, because there were parties that didn't. But what happened was throughout the 20s, throughout the mid 20s, throughout the 20s, and even earlier, as early as the 1910s, they tended to listen. Maybe not initially, but by the 20s definitely, because the Soviets actually successfully held a revolution. Because of
Mhm.
that, they had a lot more influence in the international, which is a real thing. They had so much influence that there's a reason why the Soviets had what was called the Third International, because those were all of the parties that essentially listened to the lockstep with Moscow. Not necessarily, but this is also kind of a nod to, because Lenin had a concept for how parties worked, which was dissent but agree. Once the party has made an opinion, no matter what your opinion is, you have to fucking agree with it, or at least say you do. You have to support it, even if you fucking hate it. And that kind of applies to the lesser parties, because Soviets were usually who were funding them, to be fair. And once Lenin died and Stalin replaced it, yeah, if you had different funny thoughts, well, you might find yourself one day waking up in Lubyanka prison. You woke up after going to bed in like Switzerland or something, and now you're being slowly tortured until you reveal you're a revisionist out to sell everything to the capitalist pigs, and then you get shot in the head. So yeah,
Justly, of course.
because of that, communists tended to listen to Moscow. And on top of that, in the Warsaw Pact, it made it much more. You kind of had to follow them, or else you wouldn't get funding, or you would get disappeared.
that said. There were Warsaw Pact members that did buck the line slightly. The
East,
Czechs were the most
East
famous for
Germany
this.
was not one of them.
East Germany was definitely not one of them.
Because so East Germany had a couple of things that really didn't go for them. First of all, in terms of the amount of land it had, in terms of the amount, because remember, it's claiming to be real Germany. It didn't even have most of Germany. It was the
It
smaller
didn't even
region
have
by
all of
far.
Berlin. It didn't even have all of Berlin.
So, in terms of state functionality, it's a lot weaker than West Germany ever would be, just initially from that. Even though Prussia
Well,
was one of the more developed regions, and they got a lot of not the Prussia part, but like the
Not
eastern part,
East Prussia. Yeah, East Prussia proper got absorbed by Poland,
and the
and a lot
Russians.
of the people that were living there then got moved into East Germany.
they
Basically,
created a
there was
crisis.
the early the late 40s in Eastern Europe was essentially the Soviets shoving populations around to
What do you think
because remember
Kaliningrad is?
they wanted the Polish government that they put in there to be a Polish government. They wanted them to have all of the Poles and the Germans to have all of the Germans,
I
so that
mean,
there wouldn't be
this is
this.
also them. This is also them wanting to make sure that they don't cause trouble in the East anymore, and also
Yeah,
it's a way to make Poland more viable.
yes,
Also,
it's
what
a
do you
way
think
to
Kaliningrad is?
try to make Polish nationalists like them.
Because
Uh,
Again,
because they're not getting East Poland back. Because
right.
Poland used to be a lot further east.
well,
Yes.
that part used to be called Galicia.
No, Galicia is in the west. You're thinking of
Volhynia, my bad, Volhynia, Galicia.
You're thinking more of like the areas of modern day Belarus and Ukraine that
Yeah,
the
that Poland used
Polish
to
So
own.
the Republic controlled.
so the
So there,
concept was, yeah, you're not getting that. In exchange, you get the Silesia and you get the Vorpommern,
yeah, you get
as well as
Vorpommern, Silesia, and Prussia.
southern Prussia.
Yeah, which while the Soviets kept the area around Königsberg as it was a major port city and they wanted
And
control of
also,
that.
it's never frozen, which is the big reason.
Yeah,
Yeah, they had to contend with the Danish belts, but that's far nicer than trying to use Murmansk with icebreakers.
Yeah, and it's a better place for the Baltic Fleet than St. Petersburg.
because it's further out, projects power. Yeah. So with that in mind, East Germany is a lot smaller, has less potential because of that. A lot of its potential got sucked up by the Soviets because fuck you, look at what you've done.
They had a decent amount of industry still because Germany was a relatively industrial country, but like the large industry was all in the western part of the country.
But
So speaking of infrastructure, how are the demons infesting it?
All right, so let's get
yeah, let's
into
get
that.
into it. But basically, yeah, East Germany's a shit show, and this is where you're in.
This is where Berlin comes in too, because as we mentioned before, the zone after the war, Germany is split into occupation zones. The French kind of do their own thing with theirs, but then the Brits and the Americans control the vast majority of the country that they have, along with the Soviets. Now, they also would agree to split Berlin into 4 sections for occupation zones.
Because remember, Berlin was the capital of Germany. A relatively recent phenomenon, but still.
Yeah. Also,
and all of them wanted
Japan,
that legitimacy.
Japan also had a British occupation zone, though it was more Australian for a short time as well. But yeah, and in any case, so with Berlin now stuck in this situation, Stalin eventually tries to starve the west side of Berlin out, which results in the Berlin airlift, and then Khrushchev kind of doesn't really do that. But the thing is, Khrushchev was also a lot less hands-on with the Soviet puppet states, aside from the Hungarian thing. But even he admitted that was a mistake.
And he mostly did it to shore up support at home, because the thing was, Khrushchev was much despised by hardliners. He was seen as a revisionist.
Because he did in fact reform the Soviet Union to not be a Stalinist cult of personality, and to try to make it a functional government that actually provided for the people.
So he admitted it was a mistake, but he kind of, at the time, he thought he had to.
He had no other options.
He was a true believer in communism.
Yeah. Again, Funny Corn Man is probably the most interesting Soviet leader that ever lived in terms of just his actual motivations and how much he bought into everything.
We're not talking about Brezhnev.
Well, we are a little bit, because it does become relevant.
Because this is a little bit before Brezhnev. Like, Brezhnev is kind of the head of the anti-reformers at this point.
Yeah. Brezhnev is making his moves in the shadows.
And he's also responsible for murdering the Soviet Union, because he decided to blow most of it on giving himself medals and growing the greatest unibrow known to man.
I don't think you could call Brezhnev anti-reformist. I think you could just call him basicist.
He's the Red Goring.
Let's keep things the way things are and not change them even a little bit.
He's the Red Goring.
In any case, as we're going through in here, the mood, and here's what's come before. So the oldest demons in Berlin remember the Industrial Revolution. They remember the Great War. They remember all of this shit. But they also say that World War II is a response to a message from the God Machine to a small group called the Thule Society. This isn't to say that it was the God Machine's plan to cause World War II, but that World War II is partially the result of God Machine fuckery from the Thule Society. Which, again, this is very classic World of Darkness, White Wolf shit.
Yeah, it was a little bit Berlin by Night.
Technically, if you've looked at the Hunter the Vigil book, the Thule Society is actually a hunter group as well.
Yeah, they're a hunters group now because of this shit. More accurately, after the war, some of the survivors of the Thule Society got together and went, we need to make sure this shit never happens again.
But yeah,
also,
in this
we're pretty
case,
sure the supernatural had something to do with all of this.
Also, in this
we're not
case,
sure what, but something.
In this case, the Unchained, this is just what they believe in. Honestly, they could be completely full of shit.
This could all be a God Machine psyop, basically, on them. That's one of the things that you've got to note about Demon, is that everything that you know may in fact be a complete fucking fabrication.
Also, let's be fair, Chronicles of Darkness doesn't usually do the, oh yes, it was this force that was behind it all.
Yeah, they do mention that it's like, of course it wasn't the only thing, it's just that the God Machine's involvement in the event of it was a non-factor. It had to be involved in something this big. Which, to be fair, the amount of destruction and infrastructure and all that other shit. Plus, the fact is that demons were falling all the time in the Second World War because infrastructure was getting destroyed by mortals by mistake. Think about it, right? There's a small village out in the middle of, I don't know, like northern Germany, right? And it just so happens that a British bomber on a night raid crashes into it. Well, that crash destroys the local church, which was the center for an infrastructure plan that was meant to ensure that the river would flow in the right way at this time of the year in this century. And the demon that is minding it though the angel that's masquerading as the local priest is now without purpose, so they fall. Like, there's a lot of that sort of shit going on. In any case,
Yes, we're finally
Berlin.
talking about Demon the Descent. It's a lore rambling.
It's a lore rambling. We ramble.
And on top
But
of that, not everyone knows the actual mindset of the Cold War at that time.
yeah, the Cold War mindset for us, almost a half a century away from it, is kind of fucking alien. It's incredibly paranoid. It's also incredibly fatalistic in many ways, because it's like there's a sword of Damocles hanging over your head that you have zero control over. Because at any moment, some motherfucker could do something really fucking stupid, and then that could escalate from there into basically
What
the
you mean, like
apocalypse.
accidentally flying a spy plane over from one country over to another, making someone believe that the first assault has begun.
Or
Yeah,
Or
or
let's say you are a Soviet missile-based commander, and you're just kind of listening along to just because you managed to get access to American radio, and you hear Reagan jokingly go, "The bombs start falling 5 minutes from now. God bless
the
you all."
bombing begins in 15 minutes.
Minutes, yeah.
some general does a little silly thing and sends one of his
Or some commander
bombers to
goes
attack your
fucking rogue
country.
and decides it's a great idea to try to nuke Pearl Harbor or whatever else. Like, there's so many ways that things can escalate very quickly.
Just watch Doctor Strangelove. That
Yeah, and it
will
can go out
explain
of
it.
control. So
Yeah, well, that's just your opinion, man.
What?
Sorry, that was in response to Dark Sun. It's been nearly an hour. I get right for that comment. You knew what you were getting into when you got into lore rambling. You should have seen our Chinese changeling one.
and Geist was also part of that one.
Mm-hmm. So again, the mindset's pretty alien, and also nukes are prevalent. And in this case, the Unchained are of the belief that World War II was a god machine plot that went horribly wrong. Probably not. Let's be fair, it probably wasn't. Because this
Yeah,
is not old World of Darkness where it would have been.
I mean, I could see it as
Old
a
World of
cope.
Darkness had a fucking vampire start World War II, which is,
Because a previous vampire told him, "You suck as an artist." I'm not even kidding.
yeah. Berlin by Night is a fantastic book. You should read. You should watch our lore ramble on that one. It's so funny. Anyway,
I could see the Unchained looking at falling as a cope. It's like, well, why did we fall?
Yeah, that actually
Yeah.
sounds pretty right to me. Because a lot of these Unchained kind of fell during the war.
yeah,
Because a lot of demons are also destroyed, and angels too. So.
yeah. In any case, the
Oh,
thing that
what's the
has
God
happened
machine? It's an unknowable, unscrutable, probably insane machine that doesn't actually
it
have a
is
set thinking. It just has a set series of
it's
plots.
doing things, and these things are weird, and it may or may not be doing things that are blatantly supernatural, or it could be just manipulating these random things, or getting people killed, or harvesting bodies for some reason for something. There's the God machine is a
It's not
blind
quite the
idiot
Weaver,
god
also.
almost.
The best way to
It's not really
describe
the
it.
Weaver, because the Weaver doesn't do shit like, I don't know, set up, like, bomb a town because it needs to, because that sacrifice has to happen in order for someone to be born in 3 years that will then meet someone else to have another child who will then be a major part of a major ritual, which will, I don't know, cause a cow to fall over. I don't know. Like, you don't know what the God Machine is doing. You cannot know what the God Machine
Basically,
is
the God
doing.
machine has a bunch of. It does a lot of predictive planning, but what those plans result in, they're
Who
very
knows?
random. They're very random, first of all, and their impacts may not be that much, or it may completely destroy things on a local and, let's be fair, technically a national, international level, depending on how severe its ripples go. That's why it's sort of plausible World War II might have been an accidental part of the infrastructure, like the radio station that was destroyed might have been part of the God Machine. Like the
Like, who
specific
knows?
radio station might have
Like,
been the lightning rod for the war to start with, but
And then the other thing is that the God Machine, in order to enact its plots, has cults and primarily its
bolts,
servitors,
agents,
angels.
angels. It has just random buildings that will do weird fucking things.
And if an angel ever screws up or basically starts to question, or
Yeah,
they could just
angels.
it could fall, and at that
oh
point
no
it
no
now
no,
becomes
the
an enemy
moment
of
it
the God
even
Machine.
thinks like what the fuck am I doing? The very moment that happens, that's when they
Angels
fall.
have to be by necessity somewhat semi-autonomous because they have to be able to respond to impromptu
They have the ability of thought, but it's when they
situations.
think about thinking that's when they fall.
They're not necessarily thinking about thinking. It's more that they're thinking about.
Why?
Uh, it's more that it isn't even why. It could be that the command that they're given is no longer possible to be achieved, and because it's no longer possible, they fall.
At,
Because they are receiving contradictory or paradoxical orders
and
that can cause a fall.
at which point you are the enemy. Even if you are a faithful
And
servant of the God Machine,
the
God Machine
God
wants you
Machine
dead.
now views you as a rogue process that needs to be taken back and recycled. Now, there are demons that willingly choose to fall, and there are those that just fall because the God Machine fucked up.
Yeah, and has a
And
paradoxical order they can't fall. It basically, rather than talk them to death, like that type of computer paradox, instead of that, they become self-aware fully.
they try to sever themselves from the God Machine. Yeah.
Now, some of
Now,
them might actually be like, "This was an error. I must go be processed." And yeah, that is an actual type of demon. They don't usually
Then there are,
last long, but still.
oh, and then they get the bright idea. Well, I could actually do more work by sending other people on false assignments to get captured and then be assimilated by the God Machine.
I mean, that's
yeah,
sort of
because
the
there's
thing.
groups of demons that want to return to the God Machine. They want the God Machine to take them back
So what they'll
because
do
it's
is they'll try to
obviously they
fulfill
made a
the
mistake.
yeah. So what they'll do is they'll try to fulfill the original command or the infrastructure order, or essentially aid them from the shadows. Then you got ones
Yeah.
that are like the God Machine's broken, so I gotta fix it. And then you got the ones that are like fuck the God Machine. And then you got the ones who are just like I just want to sit here and be degenerate.
Then there are the ones who are like, well, now I have a child now. I don't want to kill it or get rid of it or anything like that.
Like
And
I'm attached to what is around me.
My cover is me now.
Yeah, there's demons are theoretically immortal. Theoretically. As long as they're switching covers around and things like that, they are immortal. The second they lose their last cover, though, it's game over.
So yeah, World War II caused a lot of demons to fall, angels to fall and become demons. And
imagine now you're in that situation and the war is going on. Now the war's over.
Yeah, not only is the war over, but there's now this thing that's happening in in Berlin, right? The wall is going up, and the weird thing about this wall is that at first it doesn't seem to be doing anything
yeah, the
to
fateful
demons because
message goes
demons.
into that, goes into more about World War II, but we're going to the wall because screw that.
Yeah, as mentioned, like it was more or less just a fence in the built within the boundaries just to keep people from crossing. It was a very simple thing at first. It later became much more complicated, but early on it was literally just a fence with barbed wire. But then in the next couple of weeks, something happened. There is now this weird supernatural barrier that is following the path of the Berlin Wall. The things that demons are trying to do to cross it aren't working,
On top
and
of
they
that,
don't know
that
why.
barrier blunts other supernatural abilities
Yeah,
possibly too.
other supernaturals are also noticing it too because there are a lot of vampires in Berlin. There's a decent amount. It's one of the areas where it's there's food, which is not exactly easy to come by after the war.
On top of that,
And
while Berlin was a small capital at the time. Because of its importance now to the German state, you almost certainly have some mages hanging around too, as another
Yeah.
example.
In any case,
But yeah, it's being observed. And this is where the concept, maybe this is a God Machine plot, might be a thing. It might have been. Maybe
Yeah.
this was a specific plan just so that it could build this infrastructure for reasons unknown. Who knows?
And also, the demons don't even know whether the God Machine is picking sides in this human thing. There are some that honestly 100% believe that either the communists or the West are 100% a plot of the God Machine in order to enslave all demons again. And we cannot let them win. There are groups that, like all these groups are also doing things that are incredibly morally bankrupt at this time. Assassinating leaders and politicians, espionage on various entities, surveillance against their own citizens, ethical things.
Yep, your average day in East Berlin.
Yeah, everyone. But mind you, that's also happening in West Berlin.
Yes, because of the not ease anymore. That's kind of fallen to the wayside. But sleeper agents for the Stasi.
There's that, but there's
Also,
also the
there's
fact that
the
Western intelligence agencies are also monitoring the East and the West because they want to know if they're getting infiltrated. Both sides are incredibly paranoid about that.
Especially since, if you're wondering, this is during the time period where there was an actual very hard left-wing terrorist organization in West Germany.
Yeah, the Red Army faction.
Yep.
Though they were more in the 70s.
It's more in the 70s, but they began around this time. Not necessarily early 60s, more like mid to late, but still.
Yeah.
Genuine concerns by the feds, and the feds are by the feds and the MI6 and other. So they are possibly liquidating people who might form something like the Red Army faction.
Yep. And again, we don't know how, because there's also things like Operation Gladio going on, where the U.S., the CIA specific, is funneling money to, I shit you not, neo-Nazi groups and right-wing paramilitaries in case of Soviet invasion to form paramilitary resistance cells. This became a bit of a hot topic in Italy, especially because a lot of the guns that they sent to Italy were then used in the Years of Lead, where there were groups of Italian communists and basically fascists that were shooting each other in the streets.
Basically fascists. No, they were. Like, if you're wondering, one of the funniest moments was to prevent the communists from winning in Italy. The feds actually gave funding and basically forced the Christian Democratic Party of Italy to make a coalition government with the goddamn movement, which, if you're wondering, proudly at the time in the 80s, it proclaimed itself the proud successor to Mussolini's legacy.
Yeah.
I'm not fucking with you.
The Cold War was a wonderful time in terms of ethical bankruptcy on everyone, on the side of everyone.
So, with that in mind, there's a reason why the demons, when they say they're all acting like the God Machine, well, that's not necessarily true. They have good reason to think this.
They have good reason to believe this. So there's the paranoia of that. Now there's also the paranoia of being a demon. Then there's also the paranoia of anyone and everyone is being watched. Everyone is being watched. You might, if you're in the West Berlin, you might say, "Well, no, I'm not being watched." Well, my government wouldn't do that. No, they're doing it.
They're almost certainly doing it.
Yeah, so is the East. It is happening. It is a fact of life. So, the rules of the game for demons is basically like high paranoia. Anyone who is too interested in events could possibly be interrogated. Anyone who goes to the wall too often on either side could be detained and interrogated by intelligence services, and maybe disappear. And if you commit an act of sabotage against a God Machine infrastructure, God fucking help you if you get caught, because neither side is going to be.
Yeah, they're not going to be sympathetic. They're going to assume that you're working for the other team.
Yeah.
Like you blow you detonate an explosive inside a perfume parlor because you found out that the perfume parlor was a God Machine plot to affect the atmospheric conditions in that neighborhood via venting for some plan that you don't know how long it's going to kick in, but you know the vapors were not normal. You do that, and this is in West Berlin, let's say. Yeah, the feds are just going to detain you as a communist agitator, like a proto Red Army liberator or something, and then basically waterboard you. Like that's in the West. In the East, they might just straight up kill your cover.
Yeah.
Better hope you have another one, fucko.
And even in the West, they might just take you to a basement and you've disappeared. You're a missing persons report.
They are willing to. That's just they're less prone to doing it than the East. They will happily do it though.
Yeah.
Happily. I'm not saying they're much better. This is the same group of people that also funded a fruit company into overthrowing a government. Because that actually happened less than 10 years prior.
Yeah.
We didn't fund the fruit company. The fruit company helped us.
Yeah, they legitimately overthrew a government to help a fruit company because the fruit company said it was communist, and Eisenhower had like an old man yelling at cloud moment.
Well, we were also, again, paranoid. Did not want communists in the Americas.
Yep.
For reference, the fruit company tried that with Truman and Truman was like,
Go
okay,
fuck yourself. Yeah.
yeah.
In any case,
Eisenhower was particularly anti-communist.
So yeah,
the
demons in Cold War, you really do need to take care of your covers, especially since it's gonna be a bitch to even get new ones. People aren't trusting people. You're not going
Hell,
to really be able to bargain or make deals or establish new things because you're being watched. What you have, it's probably what you start with. It's probably what you're going to end with if you don't get destroyed.
technically, even if you do everything right, you might get put away anyway because someone didn't like you and called you and named you a communist slash anti-communist.
Which is a thing.
Well, actually, I do think there probably would be a good source for covers. Actual radicals,
yeah,
because they're
they are on both
paranoid.
sides.
You can
They're a
take
great
Yeah,
advantage of
source.
them.
in the sense that if you want disposables, because they ain't lasting long, buddy. They ain't going to last long. And even then, you'd have to try to find them. And the other thing is, because you're using your more stable cover, that cover's fucked because of spying. Like it's
Then
bad on both sides at this point. Awful. I'm not saying you can't find new covers. I'm saying it's gonna be a good luck.
Yeah. It's also that West Berlin is in a weird legal position right now. Technically speaking, it's immune from conscription, which makes it a haven for anyone who wants to try to avoid that. So there's actually a lot of young people in West Berlin. Uh, most of the city has been rebuilt in the West. There have been agreements that have been hammered into place and efforts made to keep the city functional by the West, and about 1 million people in total live in Berlin on both sides of the wall. But it's a tenuous position because everybody knows that if you're talking to someone in West Germany, East Germany is listening to you.
On top of that, if at any point the Cold War starts to come close to being hot, the very first thing East Germany can do is just lock
They're going
the
to
entire
they're going
city
to
down.
they're going to move into West Berlin to secure it because there's about a brigade of troops in West Berlin.
And
They're
they're not supposed to hold it. They're supposed to delay them as long as they can.
Yeah, the Berlin Brigade is basically a one-way trip. Their job is to hold out as long as possible, then go to ground and start basically terrorist activities. Um, they are relatively well monitored by the Eastern powers as best as they can because of this. But you never know. That's the paranoia aspect of it. In any case, East Berlin is the capital of East Germany.
Because
It's
again,
economically,
they want to be seen as the legitimate successor.
yeah, they are. They still have to pay massive war reparations over to the Soviets, which is actually a huge chunk of the early East German economy is going directly to repaying the Soviets for the war.
And that's why a lot of people began to flee, because it destroyed their
Yes,
economy.
yes. There are East Berlin is still a relatively nice place compared to some areas, but it's definitely not what I'd call a great place to live.
It's
It,
mainly,
it
do you like Khrushchevskas, which have little surveillance systems inside them so the Stasi know what you're doing at all times?
that's what's here.
Also, all that investment, that's not for you. No, it's for your it's for your government.
It's for your government, and it's also for the Soviet forces in Eastern Germany, well, Berlin is one of the few places where they can go to get goods from the West, because there is in fact trade between both sides of Germany.
No, officer, you don't understand. The perfume shop was haunted by the god machine. Yeah, good luck. Good luck after saying something like that. They're just gonna lock you up.
Actually, probably saying that would at least explain, okay, this guy's actually crazy.
Yeah,
You're very
and
optimistic.
they talk about the demons. So basically, it's pretty simple. Most of the actions that are done is that, well, you can put yourself in any niche in the city if you need to. That's one of the advantages here in the West. The East has it also very interesting, where it's relatively easy to establish covers because the
There's a
ultimate
lot of young
party,
people that basically are, or it's very easy to craft one because there's a lot of people that just come here to avoid the draft.
yeah, in West Berlin. In East Berlin, it's a little bit different. In East Berlin, it can be hard if you can establish yourself as a bureaucrat. It's very possible. It's not too bad, but it's the Stasi are still going to be looking out for you. Outcasts who steer clear of positions within the party often favor intellectuals because, well, they're useful skill wise. The cover will help maintain that, give you the skills, and it's like, oh, there's all that, and they can still move around
Because
compared to.
in East Germany, if you're a technical expert, you're very much like after the
You're a
initial brain
vital
drain.
asset. You're a vital asset to the nation, and you are given relatively free reign to move around.
Mainly because after the initial brain drain, this was one of their solutions to try to avoid it happening more. So that's usually your approach in East Germany. It's a lot harder to actually build a cover in East Germany, but
It's easier and it's harder.
well, yeah,
They
because
talk about.
technically Berlin is still one of the nicer places, so you could just be a transplant. You just have to make sure your cover has decent-ish connections to whatever small town in East Germany you say you came from.
Yeah, they also mentioned that covers and covers. So, like, what about intelligence officers? Because some demons have end up being spies. Because,
Quite a few
well,
do
it's
because of the either appeal or thriller its use for them.
yes. The problem with that, though, is that it's difficult for an undercover agent to act in a way that would compromise their cover, right? So the demon's behavior is radically different from that of their cover. It's a compromise of the cover. The exception, though, it kind of goes into there. They also mentioned that Soul Pact doesn't tell you about the person the identity that you're taking. The demon doesn't know the drop points, fast phrases, codes agent uses, ins and outs of their job, or the alias, or whatever. And there are other people that may notice you acting strangely. Now, it's generally not a very good idea to become a double agent as under a cover. It's just not going to work out. Don't do it.
Because you'll be compromising no matter what.
You might, in fact, end up compromising one of your other covers.
Yeah, so you probably, if you're playing this game and your players decide for some reason they want to play the demon spy, probably for metagaming reasons, uh, this is the section that says this is why they're probably going to rapidly glitch out and fail.
Yeah. This also goes then into, well, what about human operatives? There's a lot. The demons are using a lot of actual human operatives. These are kind of one of those things that there are there are supernatural beings have infiltrated the security services on both sides of the wall because it's just a good thing to do. It makes sense for them to do it.
Especially in this time where it's all paranoia.
Yeah.
At
Also,
least
are
I
you
have healthcare. Someone from East Berlin, probably. That is true. You do have access to clinics. It's just, what do they have? What?
Are you a party member? Because if you're not, well,
Oh yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's gonna be
you're
some nice
much less
healthcare.
important.
Yeah, the Volkspolice, for example, are a relatively decent area to infiltrate as a demon because they're part of the ruling party. They have actually quite a bit of weaponry on them
They're fairly militarized.
because they're expected to be in the city once the shit hits the fan. You know?
Well, also there it allows you to basically, in the event that conflicts build up, this could be the core of your draftees.
Yeah. The Grenzpolizei are the other aspect of that. That's the East German border guards. They have orders to shoot to kill directly from the highest authorities, and they are often awarded for doing so.
Yep.
This is a way to keep them loyal and also to make it basically that they're willing to actually shoot to kill, which is a genuine difficulty that they had a lot of the time.
By the way, for those wondering, their watchtowers and bunkers, they have defensive fortifications. They blind you.
The climbing the wall is difficult.
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass.
In any case, the Stasi is also important. They work close to the KGB, and they are incredibly well everywhere. They've infiltrated East Berlin to a point where it's like even the KGB is looking at these guys and going like, "Holy shit!"
Oh yeah,
Like,
someone in chat actually mentioned that earlier. The
yeah,
Stasi make the KGB look chill.
yeah. In terms of surveillance within their country, yeah, the Stasi have a actual like fucking insanity here. If you end up being investigated by the Stasi as an age as a demon cover, it can very much become a problem because they will start to dig into every aspect of you, right?
And the thing is, covers, depending on how much investment a demon puts into their cover,
The more investigation that goes into a cover, the weaker and weaker it gets
yeah.
in general. So
So
this means that you can be revealed to the God Machine because the Stasi are looking at your file and going, "This doesn't make any sense."
and this is the thing. If the Stasis have suspicion on you, they're gonna keep digging,
Right.
either until they find out, or because it's rare that they're satisfied. Once you trigger their investigation bones, they usually already have a decision in mind on what to do with you.
Yeah.
So if you're stupid in East Germany, you've
Things can
basically
go
signed
bad
your
very
death
quickly.
clock. You
Yeah.
basically signed your
You
death
better
clock.
start looking for another cover buddy because it's about to get bad.
There's a problem of, well, the Stasi are probably investigating you, and if you're talking to somebody, they're going to talk to that person.
Also, if you're
Exactly.
wondering, the KGB, they're also pretty darn good at doing things. They're not as all prevailing as the Stasi, but they have a far larger budget.
Yeah.
And to give you an idea, quite a few Unchained actually suspect the KGB. They're not necessarily a cult of the God Machine. They're not, but they are a very powerful tool at its disposal. Because, well, the Soviet Union, they conveniently forget that demons actually were kind of responsible a little bit for some of the
Yeah,
Soviet Union infrastructure.
one of the other setting, one of the companion book has a wonderful setting of Russian Revolution demon, which is fantastic. Where they mention that the demons actually infiltrated the Soviet government in early on and created a nonsense agency within the Soviet government, which because there were so many like bureaus that were being formed early on, they just got swept under the radar until Stalin found out about it and ordered everyone inside of it shot.
So Stalin unironically saved the world.
Yeah.
Unironically,
Because
Stalin's
Stalin was looking over things and was like, I've never heard of this bureau. What do they do? And their title is absolute nonsense. And so they're like, this is obviously people defrauding the Soviet government. Round them up and shoot them. which, which is what the demons were doing. which.
So that's why I think this might be a bit of doublethink, but again, also Unchained don't really know everything. That's another thing. They are intelligent, they
They
are
do not.
vast, they can be immortal.
Yeah.
But these are ones that were made during the World War II period usually. And on top of that, demons usually don't like to tell the truth. They can't lie during bargaining, but they have no compunctions about just fucking lying no matter what if they're not under those guidelines.
Right.
So it's perfectly logical for them to say, no, the Soviet Union is the god, to ignore the fact that they fucked up so bad Stalin shot at them, and they had to sacrifice many covers that year.
They had to sacrifice covers and other like infiltration and things
throw
like
some
that.
of their own to die, just straight up.
Yeah. Because think about it like this: if they had a bureau within a government that they could then use to manipulate other infrastructure and manipulate God machine plans, that's impressively powerful for a demon group to
and
have.
they came close, but then Stalin's like, I don't know who you are. I'm killing you now before you can kill me.
Yeah.
I'm now imagining an anarcho-primitive Soviet Union being run by demons.
No, they would. They don't. The technology isn't necessarily the bad thing. With them, the God Machine can operate without technology, as proven by our Aztec Demon series.
Aztec Demon is a good example. That's why I think a really fun Bronze Age collapse scenario could actually be a demon one.
Yeah. Anyway, on the west side there are the Bungengrenzschütz,
BGS.
BGS, basically the West German border guard, that are essentially the police force.
They started
within,
as traffic cops, became much more like police and border patrol. They're a
they're
little more
basically the West
militarized now.
German. Yeah, they're West German military police, and they control West Berlin's like entries and things like that. They're
not as prone to shoot on sight, but they are still pretty damn suspicious.
Yeah, they're much more likely to investigate potential espionage than the Volkspolizei, for example, because the Volkspolizei have other things to do.
Yeah, these guys, they watch the walls, and they usually do things like search luggage, so have fun trying to sneak
Then, of
stuff
course,
through
there's
them.
the Berlin Brigade. The Berlin Brigade is basically the groups of French, British, and American soldiers that are inside of West Berlin. They're essentially put sacrificial lambs they're going to try to hold that side of the city for any sort of time, and they are on regular rotations. The government's intelligence officers on both sides of the line are very interested in who is actually going. There's probably a lot of espionage over what's going on with that, but it's for very good reasons, because you don't want someone potentially unreliable going to West Berlin. And if you are in the east, you want to make sure you know who is actually going in, because, well, if push comes to shove, you want to be able to round these people up after the shooting starts.
Because otherwise they are going to be a pain in the ass.
They're going to be a massive pain in the ass because, again, a lot of these guys are trained and told that, yes, here are the explosive caches, here are these over here. And as soon as it looks like we're going to be overrun, put on civilian clothes, grab the explosives, and go to ground.
And here's the other thing. This is where a lot of your more supernatural creatures sometimes sneak in.
Yeah, this is a way that demons sometimes sneak in. Humans as well. Well, not humans, angels as well, because it's a regular rotation. It's a good way to get in and out of the city that way. There's also, of course, psychics.
Which, if you're wondering why this is here, I actually kind of like it. It's probably not purposeful, but I like to imagine this is kind of this is kind of a nod to Vasquez.
Possibly deviant.
If you're
Deviant was
wondering,
around at the time,
Vasquez is a hunter organization.
Vasquez is part of the FBI, so they would not be going overseas.
True.
Well, also.
No. There are the equivalent in the British. The British have an equivalent.
You could have the British have an equivalent, so you could use that.
Well, no. The British do have an equivalent. Vasquez was actually founded as a not necessarily as a branch, but what happened was the U.S. government noticed the British actually had their own agency in the 1890s because they found out Jack the Ripper They had he never got caught. No, he did. He was a very powerful supernatural slasher that required several psychic agents to fucking put down.
That
Or
The
at
that
least,
might
British
or at least
basically
that's what,
formed their own version of Vasquez in the 1890s to deal with people like him.
or at least we think that, or at least they think that was Jack.
They found something. They found something. It might not have been Jack the Ripper, but
well
either
that
way, that's how Vasquez formed. Basically, during the 1930s, when the mafia crime rise happened during the Depression, they needed a serial crimes unit. They took the British example because at one point agents ran into something really fucking weird, and that's why they're psychic operatives.
I also feel like at the time didn't the CIA experiment with psychics and other kinds of
Yes.
Yes, they did.
Yes, they
The New
did.
Earth unit.
insane theories?
There were a lot of experiments with psychics on both sides of the curtain,
Yep.
because everyone was looking for any sort of advantage that they could. So there were people that were looking around as, can we develop psychic powers in people? Can these be used for various things? And then there's the fact that sometimes psychics were relatively correct, but a lot of these times it was also things that people could deduce with basic logic.
Well, there
Whereas,
also were a couple of fucked up experiments that's like, wait, what the fuck? Like, for
uh,
example, um, there's this classic experiment with the card reading, where
right.
technically it should be completely random. But every time people have done it, while we've never gotten to the point where people who claim to be psychic have, decisively guessed almost every time,
Yeah.
it's still,
Because
even with normal guys, it's slightly high with any basics training and belief in psychic. It still is like 10% more than it should be, which is a what the fuck.
it's weirder because there are people that can consistently get it wrong, repeat like again and again and again and again and again. So there's like weird outliers with that
So, like,
test where
what
it's
the actual fuck?
there's a little bit of what the actual fuck. A lot of it is just probability. Sometimes you just people that for whatever reason the probability is just not in their favor.
But overall, here's the thing. Like, I think the base chance was something like 20% of the time. They got 38
Yeah.
on average.
And again, sometimes it might just be that
So
they're good at
that's why
reading
it's a
what
little
people.
weird.
It might just be good that they're reading it. They're good at reading other people.
Well, no,
Uh,
that's the curse thing, because the 38% was after they removed that variable. It was like still
Yeah.
slightly higher than normal, which was a case of what the fuck? Were they listening to the voice? Maybe they don't know.
Yeah. In any case, when we're the
Oh,
psychic
Vasquez.
operatives are
If you're also curious about Vasquez. No, they've been around since first gen Hunter.
yeah they were actually first introduced in the slasher book as a hunter compact
They're very fun.
or conspiracy. They're
They're
very
very
interesting.
fun. They're a complement to the Task Force Valkyrie.
Basically, the way to put it is that TFV is the black helicopters, the guys kicking indoors, and the Men in Black, right? Vasquez is X Files,
Yeah.
like actual X Files.
Basically, Vasquez is Mulder and Scully trying to take on a psychic serial killer from beyond the grave.
Yeah, or in getting involved in whatever the fuck the plot is for X Files that week.
Or kicking down the door to beat up leprechauns.
Yeah,
I'm not kidding. That's an actual Vasquez operation.
yeah, the fucking leprechauns, running their fucking counterfeiting rings of fake gold.
He sounds like he's joking, but no, this was an actual operation.
Actual operation against Left Recon. Little elf people. That's what LEP stands for. Little elf people recon units. We have to deal with them.
So the Gespenser, so the Stasi actually do recruit psychics into the Mysterium.
Yeah. So this is the psychic Stasi.
The median
As if the
core.
Stasi weren't already crazy enough.
So this is
This is
Babylon
made
5.
up as fuck. But this is
No,
their
it's the core from Babylon 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also the psychic core from Heinlein Starship Troopers.
Yeah. So they have for example, biokinesis, psychokinesis, or telekinesis. They have telepathy as well, or reading, clairvoyance, all these sort of things.
Well, yeah, telepathy, clairvoyance. Basically, the Stasi want to know everything, and that's the sort of stuff you want.
Then we have the Iron Comrades. The Iron Comrade Initiative was conceived as a means of creating elite soldiers for the USSR. By injecting subjects with powerful drugs or exposing them to radiation, the initiatives hope to discover a reliable means of causing soldiers to manifest supernatural abilities. Most of these experiments proved incredibly pointless, usually causing cancer or radiation poisoning.
For now,
Uh,
because this was written before Deviant the Renegade.
Well, this is basically deviance right here. In 1947, the KGB captured a powerful being of undisclosed origin, which was then turned over to the initiative several years later. The scientists of the Iron Comrade Initiative found a way to tap the creature's power and distill it into a form that could be administered to the subjects of their experiments.
No, they're ghouls.
Possibly.
No, it's pretty
The
clearly ghouls.
although their success rate is far less than 100%, like 10%, and half of its subjects usually fucking die, it considers it a success. Most of the Iron Comrades manifest multiple supernatural talents, like kinetic abilities such as, biokinesis, psychokinesis, and telekinesis, along with aura sensitivity, aura reading, unseen senses, all that. They are officially the group that will help to deal with supernatural threats
No,
within East Berlin.
you're right. These are deviants because this is basically a deviant plotline.
This is basically a deviant plotline, which is really fun.
I find it funny
quite
because
like
this is way before they even had the idea of making a deviant the Renegade.
Yeah, and then of course MI13. The British figured out in 1953 that they had been completely infiltrated in their intelligence, so they decided that best thing to do is that we need to create a new bureau. They found out about the Iron Comrades because there was a defector, so they said, "Fuck it, we're gonna do our own." They collaborated with the CIA.
Is this the one where they? Is this the one where they artificially made a changeling program? Because the British
No,
also did that.
This is different.
I'm not
The
kidding. The
result
British
is-
did make a changeling program.
The results of MI13, a joint counterintelligence task force that focused on identifying, hunting, and down and eliminating enemy supernatural agents. They are very small, so they only operate in areas where enemy espionage operations are likely to be. London, Washington, and of course Berlin. Psychic talents vary widely, but tend towards clairsentience, so like clairvoyance, aura reading, medium, mind of madman, omen sensitivity, psychometry, and unseen sense. Telepathy is prized but rare, and only a handful possess kinetic talents.
And MI13, pain in the ass. They're really good at knowing when to show up because they can see the future.
It's like James Bond.
Also, yes, you could. This is basically psychic James Bond. Go for it.
I'm just now envisioning the bit from Dr. No. It's like, do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. Ah, well, the problem is you're predicting the wrong person. What? 25 minutes from now.
5 minutes from now, you will die. Amarewa no Shinderu.
And then 25 minutes later, on the dot, their partner kicks in through the window and blows the Dr. No bootleg's head off.
Yeah. In any case, they have what is to come. So they give a nice rundown of what's actually happening in Berlin at this time. So 1960 is a fun time for U.S.-Soviet tensions. The U.S. moves nuclear missiles into Italy and Turkey. France has tested their first atomic bomb. There's also the U-2 incident where we flew a spy plane over the Soviet Union and it got shot down.
Yeah,
and then we denied it. Then we denied that, of course, it was a spy plane. And then they produced the pilot, who quite willingly admitted it was a spy plane because he knew the fucking gig was up and didn't want to get shot. And they basically told him, "You're not going to get shot if you admit that you were a spy. We're just going to, this is more of a humiliation thing than anything else because this is Khrushchev, right? He was not Stalin. Stalin would have had the guy shot. Khrushchev wanted to embarrass the West."
This is also the Sino-Soviet split.
Sino-Soviet split is beginning, yes. In West Berlin, someone murders an elementary school teacher with a sickle and a sledgehammer. The body is found in the victim's locked house with no sign of entry or exit. Killer goes unknown. Killer is unknown and apparently kills some more people. So supernatural serial killer is somewhere in Berlin. Pot hook.
Red Ivan.
Yeah. In 1961, the U.S. closes their embassy. Then the Bay of Pigs happens, which is absolutely retarded. And basically the CIA, assuming that they had permission to go through with the operation when they really didn't, they kind of bullied Kennedy a bit into it. Quite frankly, Eisenhower was...
Fucked it up.
Eisenhower was also, I think, half expecting Kennedy to cancel it because Eisenhower was smart enough to know that this is not going to work. But
It's not going to work unless you actually bring in full U.S. military
like
support.
bring in support. Yeah, that's why Eisenhower never gave them the go ahead.
Other things that happened include another missile crisis because the Soviets were like, "Oh, you put nukes in Turkey. Well, here's my response: put nukes in Cuba."
Nukes in Cuba, who
And
are more than happy to have them there now because guess what? The U.S. just tried to coup our government again.
though, in an optimistic news, Gagarin becomes the first human in space.
Which causes the U.S. to tar tantrum once more because this is the second time in a row they lost a space race.
But though, at the end of the decade, it does end up becoming a good thing because we get someone on the moon.
Well, it also didn't help that what happened was the Soviets, they have a bad habit of splitting their space efforts. They had like 3 different agencies
They had
covering
3 different
space travel.
agencies all competing because a lot of this is also meant to be dual research purpose for nuclear missiles. So
Which meant that they also often got pulled for military projects. But more importantly, one of their chief architects, Sergei Korolev, died because of complications from his time in the Gulag.
Yep. Then in
And
1962,
Korolev
we
was one
have
of the more creative and driven people. I mean, there were others like Glushko and so on, but like nowhere near as passionate for just this sheer space travel as Korolev was.
Yeah, there is also the Berlin Crisis, which is a standoff between USSR and U.S. forces at Checkpoint Charlie. It
It
took
almost
less
goes
than a
hot
day.
here too.
It almost went hot here because I can't remember the exact reason why, but it almost did.
I think it's because an actual bit of gunshots happened and it almost resulted in full on shooting. Like someone discharged a firearm at one point.
Yeah. It kind of went a little bit nuts. In any case,
And
there
then
is
Cuban
a
Missile Crisis, which resulted at its worst, a Soviet submarine being ordered to unleash tactical nukes, and the commander legitimately refusing because that
like
was the end if he did.
like if he fired that, they're not going to capture us. It's better to surface and admit that we're fucked than it is to actually be fucked at this point. Because
The 2 times we came closest to destruction, the Soviet commander's like, wait a fucking minute.
Wait a fucking minute, this is really retarded. Yeah, there's more like plot hook stuff in this. Then 63 is of course the assassination.
Yep, of Kennedy.
GDR also allows West Germans to visit East Berlin during Christmas 1963.
Oh yeah, the minister of South Vietnam was also killed, mainly because the CIA didn't like. Because a lot of the South Vietnamese guys were very corrupt, and this guy was
the South Vietnamese guys were basically French puppets that were put in that were often Catholic in a country that was mostly Buddhist and very corrupt, and also persecuting the Buddhist majority in a lot of cases too. So there's a lot of reasons why South Vietnam was going to fucking collapse no matter what.
Then regarding nuclear weapons, Moscow, Washington establishes a hotline and an agreement for the partial ban treaty test.
Basically, we all agreed that we are not going to do above ground testing anymore, for reasons of both provocation and also so that we can't have more surprise tests. Or like
a certain Best Korea I don't think signed off on any of that.
A lot of people didn't sign on under the partial test ban treaty. It was really only between the US, UK, and USSR who were the largest nuclear powers at the time.
Yeah, and if you're wondering, the UK still has, I think, about 100 nukes on hand.
Yeah, they're all submarine launched, which honestly, it's really their only hope anyway. It's not like they can build silos in the UK really effectively. It's too small.
If you're wondering, the plots that happen near the end are supposed to be hooks for you.
Yeah.
These did not actually happen.
I feel like they probably should keep that separate.
I know, but I think that they wanted to include them for a good reason, which is that they wanted to tie in like year to year of what could be happening.
Yep, the concrete wall has been replaced. This is where the Berlin Wall becomes a full wall.
Yeah, in
Vietnam
65.
bombing, blah blah blah. 66, more people died.
Also, our invasion of the Dominican Republic.
Oh yeah, if
There's
you're
also
wondering, Operation. Okay, so the invasion of the Dominican Republic. So here's what happened. So in 1962/63, the dictator Rafael Trujillo tried to murder. What was his name? I think it was I forget his first name, but Betancourt, the president of Venezuela, because he criticized him, and Trujillo is a legitimate baby, like a legitimate the person who's like, you do not disrespect me. He went full mafia don. You disrespect me, I put you in a
he had a
grave.
tarred baby tantrum, basically.
Yeah. But what happened was this, combined with some other stuff he did in the late 50s, pissed off the U.S. to the point where originally it was a case of we prefer him over, say, a communist. And that delayed his death because of Cuba. But eventually the feds just got sick of him and had agents just fund dissidents to the point where what happened was they funded them pretty heavily to set up a team to kill him. And they did.
We killed Trujillo in 61.
Then his son took power.
Tried to kill him 14 times.
And then his
All of them
son
were
came into power. We eventually
killed.
forced him to leave along with his relatives. And then they had their first election. And what happened was the guy got couped because he was a democratic socialist, and the military said, "Oh fuck no," overthrew it. They led a revolt slash
Yeah, they
revolution,
accused him
civil
of
war.
they accused him of being a communist, which then had a coup. Then there was the threat that the rebels would actually put in an actual communist.
Yeah, because what happened was this radicalized quite a few. In fact,
Yeah.
although the leadership were at worst democratic socialists, but what happened was they didn't want a second Cuba. The first was
Yeah.
bad enough, so the U.S. Signed off on Operation, I think it was called Power Pack, Operation Power Pack, where they sent something like 30,000 guys to crush that rebellion. Sorry, Juan Bosch, you're not being president.
Bosch Gavino.
So yeah, that happens in '65 just because they didn't want the Dominican Republic to destabilize more of the Caribbean, which, yeah. Let's see, some more details in '66. So some
Transfer
of this
drugs from NATO
is
command
supernatural,
structure.
some of it's not.
Um, 67. Latin American Caribbean nations signed treaty.
Tate
Loco.
Loco, which basically they saw it happened with the Bikini Atoll test, and they're like, yeah, you can't test here.
Yeah.
Six-Day War happened.
Suharto's revolution
Yeah.
and bloodshed happens in Indonesia. Tet Offensive in '68. Basically, these are all historical events that happen. Some of them are not really historical. Some of these are like supernatural stuff.
Yeah.
Oh no, a population of at least 200 feral cats. Oh no, Tech, they brought the cats from Angora.
Oh no.
No, I think the weirdest thing
It's
is
the
that
cool
they
cats.
begin construction on the George Washington Building in West Berlin.
Yeah, it's abandoned 6 months later, and yeah, again, it's one of those things. In any case,
war
there's
between China and the Soviet Union.
the fun thing about 1969, that border conflict not only nearly went hot, the Soviet ambassador to the United States, the U.S. ambassador to the Soviets in Moscow was approached by a member of the Soviet army, who basically sat him down and so hypothetically, just hypothetically here, if we nuked China, would you guys do anything? Just a hypothetical here.
That should have been a sequel to Strangelove.
It basically was. It was like in a Moscow restaurant. He like said, "Do you want lunch?" And of course, the other guy's like, "Oh, I guess," because you don't want to offend it, and he is an ambassador. Like, this is relatively.
So hypothetically, if we unleash the full fury of Aten upon the Chinese to the point where
like
they,
if we turn Beijing into a parking lot, are you going to do anything about that?
If we're going to reduce the Chinese people into the apes from 2001: A Space Odyssey, where they're just understanding how to throw sticks again after what we do with them with the bombs.
Yeah. So
What's his answer?
He basically said, I do not know our government's position on that. I will have to ask someone, and immediately contacted Washington about it.
Because this
Where,
was seen as kind of fucking insane.
well, it wasn't seen as insane. It was more of a seen as like a what the actual fuck. Like we didn't know that this was getting this serious
Like
this fast.
we knew that, and we were trying to exploit a little bit this divide, but we
Yeah.
didn't know it got this fucking bad. We thought if we even did stuff like this, you would ignore your problems for that moment and tell us both to fuck off.
Well, I'm now imagining if that ambassador was talking to MacArthur, who would have probably said, "Yes, do it,
MacArthur,
do
if
it now."
MacArthur still had access to like being able to use tactical nukes, you know he would.
Yeah. In any case, the also we get Apollo 11.
Libya overthrowing its monarchy.
Yep.
Black Sun cryptocartography.
Yeah, that's mentioned earlier.
Is that
Any
a real
case,
thing, or is that
1970.
That's a conspiracy. That's some dumb weird New World of
1970
Darkness
has
thing,
one
I
of
think.
the 1970 has one of the more interesting things, which is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is a agreement basically to try to restrict the number of stockpiles that we have.
Yeah, it's the predecessor to SALT.
Yeah.
and the spiritual barbed wire
Yeah,
now
there's ghost
becomes
barbed
that
wire.
essential barrier. So
Mhm.
that barrier comes up in 70.
It's fully like it was a significant obstacle, and they could circumvent it for a while. It was just much harder to do so. Now it's fully operational. There's a few
70,
other things that happen, which is like the Four Power Agreement.
71, a major incident takes place in Berlin Wall that requires the direct intervention of most of the East Berlin's iron comrades to suppress.
Well, yeah, because for some reason something spooked those that go bump in the night so bad they risk death to try to punch through the wall.
Yeah. Also, after this event, the Four Power Treaty comes along, which basically allows West Germans to actually move around in East Germany a lot more effectively.
Nixon visits China.
Yep. Mainly, we realized that China at the moment is the less threat than the Soviets.
Yeah.
Oh, that
Uh,
bit him in the butt.
73, Vietnam War's over.
Yeah, we withdraw from Vietnam officially at this point.
And Pinochet takes over in Chile.
Yeah.
You can critique all you want, but what would have been worse, that or a civil war? Because that's the thing if Allende won.
I mean, Allende he was attacked by both right and the left.
That's
Probably would have gotten You probably would have gotten a coup even without the CIA.
unironically. No. Here's the thing. Unironically, the military, like it's been revealed repeatedly, the Chilean military would have legitimately tried to overthrow him. There would have been a civil war no matter what. That's the. It's not quite like it's not quite like the Guatemalan thing we did, or the Nicaraguan bullshit we pulled later.
Oh,
Like
and
this was going to be messy regardless.
and uh, regarding the supernaturals, um, so West Berlin is isolated. Now there's turf wars between supernaturals. East Berlin's demons narrowly avoid falling into a god machine trap, and they go into hiding and remain there throughout the year.
I just kind of been tuning in and out on that. Basically, they're walled off and much more.
Yeah.
They're effectively walled
74.
off and
Yeah.
trapped.
74 sees a bit more thawing between the relationships between East and West Germany. There's also much more.
Demon hunters actually start showing up from the church itself, which is a bit funny.
Yeah.
The
The
Stasi
Berlin Wall begins to be
arrest several
replaced and
inquisitors.
upgraded. The shadow wear in West Berlin continues, of course. But
Mare Rouge, which Kampuchea, hell
yeah,
yeah.
that's interesting. Then, of course, we have the symbolic into the space race with the Apollo Soyuz test mission, where they first docked together.
Mainly because by this point, so what happened was we got to the moon. Well, what next?
Yeah. Then over the next 4
Mars.
years,
They said, yeah, but the people were getting sick of that shit by then, and the moon was like a big win.
yeah.
Like,
Moon
that's the
colony
problem.
actually would have been next.
Yeah, but people don't fucking care.
Not only do people care, it's
A
difficult,
lot more
it's
people
expensive, and
actually
there's not a lot of
hated the moon.
motivation.
A lot more people hated the space stuff anyway. Like, legitimately, when I point out repeatedly, civil rights movement actually fucking despised the space race because, in their own
Because it's
words,
a
why would you spend billions to send a white man to the moon when you couldn't fucking kill the rats in our goddamn neighborhood? Not even kidding. That's an actual sign.
yeah point, but
But then again,
any case,
it's a
the as I mentioned here, the
Moon coming around.
76 through 80 is basically as the Eastern
Oh yeah,
Bloc
there's the Outer
stagnates and
Space
goes
Treaty.
down.
If you're wondering, that's another thing. We signed the official Outer Space Treaty, which meant that, yeah, there's no space colonies.
Yeah,
You can't buy the moon.
yeah, and then we get the 80s with Ronald Reagan, who nearly causes a nuclear war in 83.
Not
And that is
because of his speech where he says the bombing begins in 15 minutes. That was
it's
just a
because
joke. It's because of what was called the Able Archer exercises.
basically put, both Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher had a tendency to go incredibly hard with the Soviets because they were relatively well. Reagan was not a foreign policy president. He was a culture wars president, and his foreign policy was unironically some of the worst aspects of his administration, from the Iran-Contra affair to the
The
invasion
only
of
thing I'll
Grenada.
even
There's
remotely defend him on is, keep in mind, this is after Brezhnev died, and this is when
this is his
Andropov was in charge.
negotiations.
The
It's
reign
also
of the real man.
it's also his summits with Gorbachev are really the only foreign policy ones he really has.
Well, I'm pointing out that if you're wondering, in 83, this is during, I think he might have been dead at this point, but this is within mind, Andropov was in charge, and Andropov was a much more hardball kind of guy than Brezhnev was.
Okay.
Yeah, not only that. So he's been very belligerent in his talking about the USSR as an evil empire and increasing defense spending, and it's making the Soviets rather nervous because, quite frankly, the Soviets don't want a war. They really don't.
Especially since
neither-
they're realizing they can't really match the spending Reagan's throwing into the military at this point.
Yeah,
They don't want to
Reagan is
admit it,
turning
but
up the
they've
tap.
realized
Yeah.
at this point.
It's also that Afghanistan is going on, and that's a huge money drain for them. A huge one.
And prestige drain.
And prestige drain, and they're supporting at least 3 wars right now going on in Africa. So there's a lot of other shit going down that the Soviets are pissing money off, and they're trying to compete with the Blue Water Navy fleet. They're trying to modernize their aircraft industry again.
And they're noticing to their horror, the U.S. is like, all right, bet, and doubling down while they're struggling to do what they're doing.
And massively increasing defense spending. Well, not really massively. It's a pretty sizable increase, but it's more of a modernization program than anything else. It's essentially we want to get things out within like the next 5 years that we've been working on over the last decade. So let's just go and do it. The major thing that then happens is our Able Archer 83. Now, Able Archer is a relatively simple exercise. The idea is quite simple. It is a response on a command level of what do we do in case of a nuclear attack and nuclear war? What do we do on the ground? And we have forces, as is usual in these sorts of exercises. Both sides would do these kind of exercises where you would have troop movements inside of Europe that are simulating, other things. This is how we do an attack. This is how we do a retreat. This is how we do a defensive maneuver, whatever else.
And it's also to remind people, and this is also a good refresher because this gives the soldiers some
it's a refresher training, or it's an exercise and allows you to identify certain things. Anyway, Able Archer 83 is a bit different in that it went to that nuclear level on a larger thing where they're simulating all this sort of stuff. That's a little bit higher than it usually would go. The Soviets are also looking at Reagan and what he's been saying and are getting, understandably, a bit fucking nervous.
Because this is the guy who basically, here's the thing with Reagan, he likes to make before the microphone's on, he's always been a big prankster and jokester. So he'll like do a bunch of stupid things, but like before the microphone goes hot, he'll say a bunch of stupid things. Legitimately, this is something he has done ever since he went into politics, like even back as governor. One time though, the mic was hot when he was doing some of his jokes, which includes the bombing begins in 15
ladies and
minutes.
gentlemen,
God bless America.
Ladies and gentlemen, the defense budget is too high. In order to reduce it, I will deal with the main source of the problem, which is the Soviet Union. The bombers launched in 15 minutes. God
God.
bless America.
Like, that's
Was
the type of
I-
jokes he would do.
yeah.
I thought it was like, I've found a solution to the um to our problems with the communists or with the
No, it
Soviet
was
Union.
not that. It
We'd
was
be-
it was a solution to our budgetary problems. It was something like that, which was pretty funny.
It's hilarious, but the Soviets were like, "Oh God, this fucking crazy man,"
And to be fair,
because he
Reagan
did
was
play
not a-
hardball at the
Reagan
same
was
time.
Reagan was also controlled to a greater degree in foreign policy. Was basically whatever the fuck the last person talked to him wanted to do.
Unironically, this is the same process that Trump operated on.
Yeah, and you want to know how that was a
Hilarious.
fucking trash fire? Yeah, it's the same sort of fucking trash fire. The
Actually, if you
So-
think about it, it's kind of funny because remember, when George H.W. Bush went into power, there was an economic recession like a year after Reagan left too.
yeah, it's one of
History
the things.
repeats.
We're not actually technically in a recession. It's one of those weird things where we're actually economically looking very good. It's one of the weird things where like we expected one, but we didn't actually have it. Anyway,
Tell that to prices.
yeah. Anyway, the next step then is pretty simple. So the Soviets see this going towards this simulated nuclear exchange. Now both sides have
Oh, Coyote
Of
brought up the
course.
thing you were about to mention.
yeah. So they went into basically nuclear DEFCON on their own end during this exercise because they were worried that this was going to be a cover for an attack. Because they had made plans before, and both sides had, of using military exercises as a cover to launch an assault.
And the fact that it's stepping up, that's something that has been predicted on both sides.
Yes. So
And then the cloud formations on a fairly, it's not like the most critical, but on a fairly important region of the Soviet Union, gave a false positive for missile launches.
yeah,
Not missile launches, a missile launch.
Yeah?
Literally a
Yeah, a singular
launch.
one. And
It was
of
a
course,
guy, but
and then there was a guy that was watching this, and he had a split moment to make a decision about a minute, like 2 minutes or so, like that. And which is that either that this is an attack, and we need to respond with as is protocol by launching all missiles, or this is not an attack. This must be a faulty reading because why would they only send one? This could be an accident. If it is a single launch, it is an accidental launch, in which case, like we need to wait for further orders.
and the rational thinking of Stanislav Petrov saved the world.
Yes. He was then immediately fired for not following procedure.
Literally, yes. That is how good the Soviet Union was. They punished him.
Well, no, this would have happened on either side because you're supposed to launch. You're not supposed to think. You were supposed to just fucking launch. You can't be double checking.
You are not supposed to think. You are supposed to do.
Basically,
No,
yeah.
well, no, even in our
Yeah, it's both sides.
policy.
It's literally the
As soon
policy
as
is
we
you
get-
just do it.
as soon as
You,
we get
you
the
turn the
correct
fucking
codes,
key and you launch the nukes.
you launch it, no hesitation.
That's the
Yeah.
thing. Didn't he also get the codes too?
No. That was what was weird about it. Like
And actually, no, he did his job. If he didn't get the codes, he's not supposed to fire.
yes, but they were supposed to be on the way, basically. And I think he then said, cancel that, we're not doing it. In any case, we have the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. And then we kind of go into the supernatural inside of Berlin, where they're talking about the agencies and all that. It's very similar to our chapter when it came to Constantinople.
Oh, and if you're wondering, right around the time that the Berlin Wall is breached, that's when the supernatural lockdown broke too.
Yeah.
Although I think you can still find echoes of the old Spirit Wall. Like in modern Berlin, if you want to do a modern Berlin by Night Chronicles, you might find relic of the supernatural wall of death. So as for the supernatural, so the Unchained can't really tell to what extent the God Machine's manipulating the Cold War, because here's the thing. During the Cold War, it's almost certain the God Machine is doing stuff during it.
And by almost certain, I mean like legitimately, they are. It is. It is. But what exactly is it doing? They don't know. Now, as for the agenda that you usually deal with, a lot of it's just trying to avoid being destroyed by the spy agencies.
Yeah, a
And
lot of
their agendas, like basically, are they just here to enjoy? Are they just the degenerates who want to descend and
yeah.
make their own
We want
little
to let you
criminal?
guys read some of this book. Like, it's
Yeah.
good. It's really good. Uh,
Inquisitors are a thing that have become pretty well known. Because basically, since you're locked down in Berlin West or in Berlin East, angels are sending people to scourge them.
yeah. A lot of this is talking about the various groups and of all these cults. Then they have various personalities and angels and examples of that sort of stuff, along
Yep,
with
and they go
infrastructure
and
ideas.
yeah, they go with what they do, like curators, broadcasters, and tutors. They go into details on all of these.
Yeah, some of the fun stuff is like they're talking about like all the radio stations, including I think what is it, Radio Free Hell,
Yeah,
something like that, which is quite fun. They go into like moving parts and various aspects of like the what could be happening with demon stuff. They also said that Hunter the Vigil is a very good way to actually play Berlin in this time period, because what's
where
there,
do they write that?
they that is on page 560,
So okay. Yeah,
where they talk
Future
about like the
Fates,
loyalists.
East Berlin, they go into details on these, what saboteurs are doing. Here's what they do in West Berlin,
Yeah,
what they do in East Berlin. And if you're wondering,
they
Tempters are the guys who just want to sit there and make their own little degenerate hells. The Chronicles of Darkness. The Old Order, the Shadow Empire, was destroyed in a coup in 45, following decades of decrepitude brought on by constantly changing mortal governments. In West Berlin, the Margrave Heinrich III. Oh god, they're actually referencing fucking Berlin by night.
It was a different guy. It wasn't Heinrich the Third in that.
Rules with an iron fist wrapped in a delicate glove. The East is locked in a constant state of war as the kindred fail to penetrate the communist establishment and must fight for scraps.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's a Thunderdome for vampires in
it's a
East Berlin.
Thunderdome in East Berlin. Yeah, uh,
Also, the
Forsaken.
Stasi. Anyone who gets any remote power in the East usually gets wiped by the Stasi or by the Iron Boys.
Yeah, mages are actually doing pretty well in Berlin right now. A lot of them. There's very few that are senior members, and many of its treasures were stolen first by the Nazis and then locked away
Tech.
by the Allies.
You
But
missed one of the coolest things though. This is a beautiful prompt if you guys like playing Werewolf the Forsaken. There are packs of Forsaken who have worshipped who have fallen into worshiping the spirits of industry. You have tech cultist fucking werewolves. There is a schism among Father, not Father Moon. I don't know why they said Father Moon. It's Father Wolf. But there is a war among the werewolves where some have begun, I guess, worshiping the power of the almighty dollar and the spirit of capitalism.
yeah, why not?
What do you think?
I can see that. There are also a lot of wastelands in Berlin, but they don't seem to be Promethean ones, which is an interesting thing that they're saying is that there are possibly a bunch of in the old subway tunnels of Berlin, there might be a bunch of Pandorans running around creating wastelands, which is a fun plot hook.
That does sound like something the Nazis would experiment with.
Yeah,
Like, doesn't that sound like something like they find like they?
To
Because
make
think about it. Can't you envision Himmler in the midst of his crazy conspiracy rantings to go, the works of Frankenstein must be real. We must build German, like superior Aryan super soldiers. And so
yeah,
they
no,
have
I
Nazi
actually
scientists
now
try to make become demiurges, but since they're Nazis, all they can make are fucking Pandorans because of the evil in their hearts, turning it into flux.
I'm just thinking of I guess he's trying to people are trying to actually be a successful chicken farmer by crossbreeding chickens with humans to create the next superhuman race.
No, that's that's a deviant plotline. The island of Mr. Himmler, where it's like a bunch of chicken people, the chicken people revolt.
They turn communist.
Communist chicken monster Pandorans.
again, no, they're communists. They're Nazi communists.
Nazbol chicken monsters. Okay. Okay, that's a little too crazy. Yeah, mages have definitely been swinging around.
Yeah.
The old order got fucked because a lot of them were tied to, those guys.
Nazis. Yeah. Then we have the real fun stuff, which is the changeling one, which is that it is now right now, it is summer court all the way, baby, both sides.
And the
What does
best
that
part is
exactly
the hedge
mean?
is actually somewhat playing
Pain.
nice.
Yeah. Nobody knows why, which is the scary part of all that.
That is disturbing.
What exactly does it mean that the summer court is in power?
Well, so there's different courts and changelings, which refer to mainly how they run things and their personalities. I don't remember exactly what summer court represents, but it's essentially tied to the
It's the
courts
martial
and
and
lore.
military one.
Yeah.
But anyway, Berlin is a very old city, so sin eaters are actually kind of in a weird position where apparently ghosts are coming here from fucking everywhere.
Well, not
Which
only that, but it's like echoes of the war. Echoes of
it's
the
weird
war.
because it's like,
There's the Cold War problem, and there's thoughts maybe that supernatural walls might be powered by them.
who knows? Anyway, there's also, of course, mummy cults. Mummy cults are now in wars with the fucking secret services of various governments because remember, Berlin has actually one of the larger Egyptian collections in the world.
So yes, there are maybe a mummy or two. They're not
there are
awake at this
probably a
point,
couple
though.
of mummy. There's almost certainly mummy cults that are active in Berlin right now, which is hilarious
Oh,
as
and
a
if you're
concept of
wondering,
like a three-way shootout between the Stasi, a mummy cult, and a bunch of demons.
also, if you're wondering, the Bandiger are Berlin's most well-known hunter group at this point. Chiron Group
Yeah,
is actually doing a lot of experimentation with cash from Western powers. And the
Malleus
Malleus
Maleficarum.
Maleficarum is basically going to war with the demons.
Yeah. You also have the Loyalists of Thule are active on both sides of the wall at this point.
Essentially trying to hunt down rogue elements from the old regime.
Yes. They also mentioned that Vascu does, in fact, have a...
Told you they were there.
Yeah.
Told you they were there.
Was it Vascu? No, it was not Vascu. That was a guest appearance thing. It's the Loyalists of Thule, which, of course, are the main experts when it comes to supernatural Berlin. Demons actually may often come into contact with them and use them as their own resource, which good luck telling them shit. Because if you do, you're going to get fucking murdered by them. They are not going to be playing around at this point.
There's a bunch of personalities, by the way. For example, there's Lynx, which is a guardian angel.
Yeah. I want to say that we can skip a lot of these personalities because again, I want to let people read some of these because they're very good.
These are all the people that are native to here. They go into detail about some of the infrastructure, like static radio, for example, is infrastructure.
Like the static radio, trains, interrogation
String
rooms.
Geheim, for those who played TNO.
This is the Haus der Technik, which is fun. It's been like a bunch of different things, and it's a concealment infrastructure, which is kind of fun.
Interrogation rooms, another example. Number 4.
Yeah, there's also, of course,
very
museums,
infamous.
Which are parts of the museums themselves are also parts of the infrastructure network.
Yep. So playing the game, although the Cold War has been going on since the Battle of Berlin in '65 and 45. Sorry, I had a brain fart. I saw 61.
The construction of the Berlin Wall is the real.
That's when it really, really, technically 50s, but this is when it officially becomes a big thing.
At least in Berlin. So it is no accident that much of the terminology 21st century demons use to describe their operations and abilities stems from this time and place in history. Cold War Berlin is a crucible that will test the resolve and cunning of its outcasts. Half a century hence, demons will look back on it as a time when both the hopes of hell and human survival flickered and grew so dim it seemed like they would perish. Basically, this is a bleak fucking age. And then they present several stories that can be used within Berlin, along with infrastructure moving parts, a blueprint.
And if you're wondering, thank you, Squirrel Killer, for clarifying what the Summer Court, because they're martial. The reason why the Winter Court's terrified, they're crazy enough, especially since they gotten pretty far into the hedge, To think they might actually have the ability to go to fucking war with the gentry on their own turf,
Not only that, but they're not exactly hiding from, the intelligence
which is seen as
agencies.
madness.
Well, I'm just imagining changelings now getting a nuke and trying to nuke the hedge.
Good fucking
Yeah.
luck. The nuke will just release flowers.
But yeah, they've got all these plot hooks, which are actually they're all pretty good.
Like ghost
Uh,
numbers.
In any case,
The sewer troll.
yeah.
Don't
The
you want to
Church of
deal with the sewer
Reconciliation.
troll?
The Church of Reconciliation, the Confession of Herr Arger, or
Herr
whatever,
Arger, which means Mr. Strife. He's the
Mr.
demon
Strife, the
who
demon that
may have
triggered
caused
World War
World
II.
War.
Yeah. There's the Church of Reconciliation, which is a bit of a
No,
interesting
there's
one.
Radio Free Hell.
And there's also Radio Free Hell. There's also Bad Blood, which I love, by the way. This is a fun one, which is that the KGB discovers vampires are manipulating the politics of Eastern Germany and sends iron comrades to crush the interlopers. A temporal agency, which is like a demon thing, sees an opportunity to expand its influence and assigns operatives to infiltrate the Iron Comrades. And the God Machine quietly seizes control of the East German supernatural intelligence.
Which is not good.
So it's going to be
So it
Stasi
is
versus KGB.
Stasi
this is
versus
basic-
KGB in East Berlin, which sounds really fucking fun as a campaign, honestly.
It does. It sounds like a really good thriller because basically this could result in a lot of horrible things happening in East Berlin.
Yeah.
Not just East Berlin. You might see Soviet boots stomping into Germany again.
Yeah. They have a lot of their inspirations are very simple, which is Cold City, which is other role-playing games actually, which I think is a very interesting touch.
That's a good.
They
I
choose
like
two
that
of
they
them.
actually mentioned that.
They include two of them, which is Cold City and Spion, which are both very good. There's also The Lives of Others, which is a film from 2006, which is about the wall and the divided Germany. And a lot of deception and all that. And then, of course, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, which is a classic bit of spy thriller fiction set in Berlin. Up next, of course, it would be
Harlem Werewolves.
not necessarily Harlem Werewolves, just New York City Werewolf, really,
New York
in
City
1970s.
Werewolves. Hell yeah.
And not just New York City werewolf, New York City werewolf in the 1970s.
You know,
Which
the
is,
1970s, which is the main inspiration for a lot of gang and drama dark films.
It's the New York City. It's the setting for New York City for Taxi Driver, Shaft, and of course the Warriors.
Which, if you, and it's also what you usually envision when they show like a rundown city full of graffiti. That's New York at this time.
That's New York in the 70s. As mentioned before, every cities have a life cycle. They get shit for a while and they return back to prominence, and they get shit for a while again. It's just the circle
Or
of life for any
alternatively, they
major
get
city,
so shit it just collapses.
which is the Detroit.
So yeah.
But even then,
oh wow! Even with all of the lore rambling we did, this is only an hour long.
this has only been
A
2
little over 2
hours.
hours. So about
2
an
hours and
hour
15
for
minutes.
this.
So
yeah.
Yeah, so we've gotten through this quickly now. Admittedly, we skipped over a bunch of pages because there's a lot of detail there. I don't want to ruin
Well,
you
it's
from
just, if
reading
you're
that.
wondering, it's a suite of characters because unlike most settings, I'd say this one kind of is more driven on like the thriller settings. So if you know how they operate,
If you know how to make a spy story, that's what you need to do here. They're just giving you examples of, if you're not familiar with how to create a spy story, here's some example stuff for that and inspiration stuff and all that. I think this is actually one of the better settings that they do, because they do give you a lot of information and a lot of very good things. They don't need to necessarily go into like how things are different too much, mechanically speaking, because this is the time when computer skill, it might still be whatever it was before Enigmas, but it's moving towards computer. The other skills are still relevant. There's no like.
Well, yeah, because like computers in the 60s, yeah, they were actually fully electronic at this point. Transistors were made.
You know what I feel like
one of the oldest programming languages at the time, which I think was Fortran, was also designed too. So
you could have a computer skill, yeah.
I feel like what they probably could have added was maybe a little bit more example on how is the spying conducted.
I think that they want you to. They don't want to put people down into like the idea of what a mundane spy would do, because quite frankly, demons aren't mundane spies. A lot of the tricks of the trade may be adopted from intelligence agencies or consistent with them because they're both just good ideas. But the base demon book contains a lot of that already, of basic trade craft and other things. The main thing that I think they want to get across from this is the attitude, the mood, the people that are involved, like the players, in terms of like a large scale of like what's at stake in Berlin right now and why you might be there, which is, I think, an important part of Demon is that there is a paranoia, and this is probably the most paranoid place on Earth for about 50 years.
So,
Like
yeah, like you don't
everyone
need
you
to
meet,
go into details about spying, especially since it kind of assumes if you're playing this game, you have at least some ideas already on how spies might work.
yeah,
They do give hints like on how it's more what they're like as an agency. You see that the FBI, they keep an eye on you, but they usually give you at least some limited privacy. They just kind of check every now and again. The Stasi, though, no.
yeah,
They want to know everything as
yeah.
much as they can.
The Stasi have a network of informants, both willing and unwilling, through
They
a
bug
lot of stuff.
houses just because they can. They entire structures were pre-bugged just before you moved in too.
Yeah. Again, this is one of those things where if you
It's
want
more
to,
their personality, not their mechanics. Because
yeah,
you know a very
if you want
simple
to go,
method for a demon, for example, to do some spying. Make a
you,
cover that's a house cat.
yeah, yeah, like stuff like that, where it's like, yes, you can have a cover be a building.
Or a house, like it's not a good cover, it's not a strong one, but it doesn't need to be. It's something you hop into if you need some quick info.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck with that one though, because it's going to be tricky to maintain.
Well, you
And
don't,
even if you don't want it to be temporary, it's still going to cause issues because remember, fraying covers attract God machine attention.
and that's why you disperse it elsewhere.
Yeah. Also,
I'm
making a
just saying,
deal
like
with a cat.
this is a very rough, or just it's a very rough setup. But basically, yeah, it's little things like that.
Yeah, there's other exploits and embeds and powers that demons have that allow them to be fantastic spies, and they mention that.
Yeah, like there's a bunch of them. Just
They mention that being in cover as a spy, as also being in cover as a demon, is very difficult, and it's not recommended. And they also mention scenarios where you might have to have one of your covers kill another one of your covers.
which, if that's the case, that causes fraying, which isn't
Oh
good.
yeah. It's also like one of those things where it's like you might have to burn one of your covers and you have to pick which one to burn. There's a lot of dramatic tension you can bring that with, like, as a storyteller. I say that this is one of the better sections because it does give you just enough to start getting going, I think, and that's important for, I think, for when you have a limited amount of pages. You don't necessarily.
Structure-wise, I'd say this one is middling. Concept, time, and the chosen supernatural, though, this is a high quality one.
Yeah, I'd say that this is excellent.
Excellent concept. I'd actually say pretty solid because I was skimming through the whole thing. I'd say pretty solid introduction. And also, I can say this: it's not like it's not like Wolf and Raven. No one gives a shit about Brian Boru.
Who?
Exactly.
Exactly. No one
Uh,
gives a shit about the Battle of Clantarf, whatever,
I
in
think it is literally the Battle
994.
of Clontarf. I think you got that in one.
Antarf,
Or is
is
it
that something for
Clontarf?
Battletech?
No, Clontarf is a battle in Ireland between like
It
the
was a
native Irish and the
battle.
Vikings.
It was the last hurrah of the Norse Gaelics, essentially, when they ruled Dublin. Like it was kind of their last hurrah, but not really because they were there for like even longer, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it's like out of all of the points you could pick for Viking era, this is what you fucking pick. Not 865, not even 1066, where you have Harold Hardrada's last ride.
I mean,
Fucking hell, man.
1066 was by the time when the Viking raids are basically over.
I'm just pointing out that like the last of the real Viking things was like Harold Hardruler from Norway.
Yeah. In any case, though,
I'm
like,
sorry, but yeah, like kind of a similar concept where it's like a specific city and a specific date, but honestly, it gives me more Constantinople vibes.
It does, and I think that this
Demons
is
in
a good
Constantinople.
Yeah, well, Constantinople is an excellent setting because it's a time period that not a lot of people know about, and they go into a lot of detail on
Several of the
Constantinople.
Sultan's reigns. They don't go through
Yeah,
all of them, but they go through like the more important ones for like the growth of the city before it begins to decay.
yeah, and they also go on about so what happens when a city is destroyed, but the God Machine infrastructure,
It's
is
still
destroyed
around.
too, or most of it's gone. That's the reason why Constantinople is such an interesting place at that time.
True.
In this case, there is still a lot of infrastructure active in Berlin at the time. And there's a lot of demons that have fallen because of what infrastructure was destroyed, or have come to the location because they know there is still some infrastructure working.
And there's also the interesting gimmick that because they mention East Germany a lot, because with East Germany you can kind of still travel outside of the city,
Yes, so
but
you
in
could do some
West
stuff.
Berlin you're locked in.
You're mostly locked in. There are trains that go from West Germany to West Berlin. It's just that they're highly monitored. They're locked down, highly monitored. You can't leave except for very specific exits into Berlin.
So yeah, I'd say I would put this in the upper third of all of the ones we've covered.
Yeah,
Good
it's
concept. It gives at least the basics for people to kind of work with. I can't really say it's like in my tops because it's solely, it kind of expects you to already be
familiar with Demon.
a
It
little bit
it
familiar with Demon, and on top of that, it also expects you to kind of be able to create everything on hand. It gives you the
now.
personality and mindsets, which is fine. I operate very much like that. I just on the fly.
Yeah, admittedly, what I want to say with that is that it's because this is one of the most recent settings. There's living memory of all this,
So
right?
there is
You
some
might have,
assumption still.
yeah, there's some assumptions, and then there's some thoughts that you have a good idea of what this is like already, like the kind of like what life is like in a industrial modern society, right?
Yeah, they
We
don't
we
need
get
to go
saw
into
that.
detail about that. I think it's more just like, for me, it's not. I'm not trying to denigrate it because it's very much. It's just I would not recommend having this one unless you've story told before.
Yeah, it's a complicated setting. It's not
It's
a
a fairly complex setting, and on top of that, it it's not the most overall friendly into aiding a storyteller in creation.
also for new players. Like this is a
Oh God,
you will have four demons that will die because they decided to piss off the Stasi.
no, they have four. Oh,
You
no,
know,
they didn't even decide to piss off the Stasi. It's just they fumbled so quickly because they weren't thinking about things like being subtle. The Stasi just fucking takes them to the German equivalent to Lubyanka and just pulls the trigger on all four of them.
yeah. I mean,
Great job, guys! You survived 1.5 sessions.
yeah, like that's sort of the feeling you can get out of this one is that you're probably going to be burning through covers if with new players here. This is definitely one for people who are familiar with Demon and are into Cold War spy thriller stuff.
I would say another really fun concept because of what they brought up is this would be an amazing Hunter the Vigil run too.
Yeah, they do mention several compacts and conspiracies that would be active in Berlin at the time, and that is another interesting thing of like, how do you fucking hunt the monsters in a police state,
Well,
right?
you're thinking East Germany. You're thinking East Berlin. I'm thinking like, okay, you're West Berlin hunters, and you have to deal with the Vatican emissary, like who's basically the character from The Exorcist, Father Karras from The Exorcist, who's
Yeah,
trying to kill demons. And you're like, I'm not interested in whatever the fuck hibbity jibbity. There's monsters in the sewers, and you find out uh, they're horrifying Pandorans created by Nazi experiments in the 40s, and that's why their
a little
people
more
disappeared.
gonzo. Yeah, like I guess my thought of that is more like the weird bleakness of how terrible man is to man in these in
I mean,
like
that's the
the
other one. You are the psychic agents that are basically sent to look at other people's thoughts and basically strip them down. Not even they're not even safe in their mind anymore.
yeah. Like imagine being normal people having to deal with the Stasi supernatural hunters while also trying to hunt the monsters. And is it
And there are monsters because
but what
remember
if the
there are
monster is a
pack
member of
wars.
the party? there's
Yeah,
a big
there are
one.
vampire pack wars, and you find out that one of the up and comers is legitimately a member of the bureaucracy. He works the night shift as like one of the comms trollers for like the transportation network, and
Yeah,
he
like
also
how do
runs a
you deal with that?
vampire gang.
Because if you kill this guy, right, as a normal citizen of East Germany, if you kill this man, there is zero protection for you. So what do you do?
Invite him to a meeting of the party.
You must denounce him as a counter-revolutionary, comrade.
Also, mummy cultists fighting like Night at the Museum style.
Yeah, that was my other thought of like that would be a fun campaign. Or at least a one shot of like, are you a bad enough dude to bust over the Berlin Wall in order to steal a bust of Cleopatra for a mummy? Like that sounds like you could do a heist movie style of game out of that, which could be really fun.
Or as mentioned by Squirrel Killer, a werewolf one where you're basically having to fight your own tribe members who fell to like some weird tech cultist bullshit,
Yeah,
or
I think that
trying to find out why all these wastelands exist.
as a Promethean, which would be like imagine being a Promethean inside of a city as paranoid as fucking West Berlin or East Berlin.
Now imagine that, but then you
Oh,
find out these are not normal wastelands. They're not even created by Pandorans.
Yeah, you could easily go into that direction too. That's another plot hook you could be looking at too. There's a lot that you can do with this setting and this time period, and it is worth looking at. I think that we can all agree that this is good. This is quality stuff.
It's a high quality setting. I'd rate
There's
it
a
as a very high. I don't know if I can quite make it an amazing book. It is very close though.
Yeah, it's very close. It's definitely an excellent territory.
I'd say if it had a couple more, I say if it had a little bit more just to maybe give newer storytellers an idea on what to do.
Yeah,
If they had something like that,
it's
it'd be even better, but that's about it. That's like the only
it's
negative I give it.
it's definitely better than 1950s Geist, but
No, that
night
one's fine. It's just the problem is why play that when you have this?
exactly. That's kind of what I mean. It's like this gives me a reason to want to play this. There's a lot of reasons to want to play
There's a
this compared to 1950s Geist, and 1950s Geist did not sell me 100% on playing it.
1950s guy sold me on a short campaign, like a short
Yeah,
saga. That's about
like
it.
a short like a short little bit of like, oh yeah, you're having to deal with some of the supernatural spooky shit, and here's all the stuff with that. This gives you the idea of like I could run a campaign in this compared to I could run a couple one shots.
See, this is what I think the Alexander Mages should have been like.
I
Because
don't blame you on that.
that's also a specific time.
well, it's
Yeah,
not just a specific time; it's a specific city.
yeah.
Like
You
this
That's
get
is
the
this.
other thing.
It's
kind of
more connected.
The Alexander, the problem with the Alexander stuff is that there's so much happening across a very, very wide space, right?
and at
It's
the core of things, this isn't like Dungeons and Dragons. The world in Chronicles of Darkness never were designed like that. It's actually hilariously a lot closer to like your local. It's closer, kind of more to Cyberpunk, where you're stuck in one place.
yeah.
Night City, Alexandria, Ankara.
Again, this is part of the gilded cage analogy for a lot of supernatural creatures. Is that why would you leave? Your food is here. Like for vampires, they need population centers. They can't survive. For mages, there's a lot of stuff that is going on with that. With werewolves, spirits, all that. Changelings, well, it's where you came out, and there's other people here that can protect you.
Yeah,
For
it's an
Prometheans, they
unknown,
want to be
scary
human.
world.
Yeah, and for Prometheans, they want to be humans. Of course, they're
Prometheans
going to
are
hang
an
out
exception. Prometheans, the best way I'd run it like that is more like an episodic where you are wandering. It's basically kind of I would have it be
like
if you're
city to city.
that would be how I do an episodic, like each saga takes place in a different city, and then it's kind of I'm envisioning the 70s Hulk take where you're the most lonely man in the world constantly, like the ending where you're walking down, where Branner's walking down
Yeah,
the road. Like that's kind of how they operate.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
That's
Um,
kind of like Prometheans are kind of the exception. That might be why you're not a fan of them, Squirrel Killer, because they are not conducive to staying in a city.
well, they are in certain cities. Like they mentioned that Prague, for example, has something that keeps wastelands from forming in it.
Or alternatively, it has to be a really large city like Los Angeles
Yeah, like LA, you can move around
or New
LA
York,
for yeah, for quite a
Chicago as well,
while.
actually.
Chicago too, yeah. Mind you, Chicago actually has a book, and we might want to cover that at some point, like at least one of the older World of Darkness
We're
Chicago
gonna have
books.
to cover Chicago by Night.
Like probably the original Chicago by Night, because the
Yeah.
original Chicago by Night is a weird book. It has a lot of things in it that are like, oh, that's where they tried to do this, and then they have concepts where they never follow it up again, like the Succubus Club.
Yeah, you can easily run a Chronicle of Darkness thing with like a really tiny town. To give you an idea for you viewers, I actually am currently running a Chronicles of Darkness game, where while they do move around a bit, their main headquarters is in a city I call Raccoon Creek, population just a bit under 6,000. The other city they go to is Rochester, which is pretty darn close to Minneapolis, but it's still a city that's like maybe 90,000. It's big, but not that big. And they
It's basically an
and
exo.
they're in fucking Raccoon Creek half the time.
Yeah, and of course I've done a campaign, at least more like a one shot really thing around Milwaukee, which is a fun vampire thing because it's like it's Milwaukee.
It's the you're the scraps of Chicago. There's not
Yeah,
much
you're
for you here.
there's not much for you. If you can't hack it in Chicago, you're probably in Milwaukee. So it's like, I,
And if you're not in Milwaukee, you're fucked. You're gonna have to go to Green Bay,
yeah. Oh God,
which is even worse.
imagine being a vampire in Green Bay. Ugh. God damn. Your only fun time would be like football games because that's the only time when you get a big crowd.
I'm sorry, Squawk Killer. But no, overall, I'd say this is exactly what I think the Alexandrian game should have been like. Where what I would have probably had it is Alexander got all of them to his capital because I think he declared Ctesiphon as his capital because I know he put it in Persia. So I'd have
Yeah.
it be they're organizing. He dies, and then they're figuring out what the fuck to do as everything's collapsing around them. Because it's like them talking, them clashing politically, but also their arguments might be causing the split up of the Alexandrian Empire to be even worse. Because sometimes it goes down to magic bat duels, and that causes paradox. I'm not saying that it collapsed because of that, but I'm just giving like as an example.
I'm not saying it was aliens, but
No, like it's an example of like some of the stuff that might have been like it's mages arguing and trying to hammer out like what the fuck their organizations are going to be like. And you got ones that are rejecting it completely, and you got other ones that are like, "Fuck this! I have my own." A lot of political fighting over how this is going to work because there's no strongman telling you what to do anymore, which means you get to do whatever you want with all of the hubris that entails. It's going to go great.
yeah.
It's going to go
So
great.
I think we can wrap it up here.
Oh yeah,
We went
easily. So overall, 2.5 hours, which is pretty short for a lore rambling.
which is perfect Lord Lamberling because we usually spend more like an hour and 45 minutes talking about the history or whatever
Oh,
the fuck else is going
no.
on
We
with it.
usually only spend about an hour. It's just usually books are a bit denser, so we spend a little more
Yeah,
time.
that's true. I mean, we
An
didn't mention
average
the
lore
absolutely
rambling is
fabulous.
an average lore rambling is about 3 hours, so I think we'd made good
Yeah,
time.
I could have gone on about the absolutely fabulous British Berlin camouflage for their tanks. It's fantastic if you haven't seen these paint schemes.
I recommend looking it up on the search engine. It's pretty glorious.
They look so weird, but when you actually see them in an urban environment, it's very good camouflage. It legitimately looks like they could be part of a building from a distance.
So let's see. Up next, I might
Up
try to.
next, we don't know.
I'm thinking I might finish off book of what was it? Book of the Arcane, Complete Arcane. Might finish Complete Arcane.
And then it's on to Book of Erotic Fantasy.
We do have rest of Eclipse phase.
I
Yeah, we
mean,
do.
yeah, I think you just got the tail end of Eclipse phase though.
Yeah, it's
See, it's all
basically
the
that.
weird and wacky stations.
Oh yeah, it's the micronations that are completely insane. Those are pretty fun. So I'd say next is probably either Complete Arcane, rest of Eclipse Phase, or God, I might dig into the dumpster. I have a lot of bad Powered by the Apocalypse books we can look at.
The problem with those is that you've seen one bad Power by the Apocalypse book. You've kind of
True.
seen all of them.
Oh wait, I have a horrible idea.
All right.
I was saving it for a different day, but what would you what what do you think of looking at the creativity movement's magnum opus?
What movement?
Oh, you don't know. Okay. Have you ever heard of a horrible little book called Racial Holy War?
Racial Holy War doesn't even work as a
Yes.
game. Like
It
I've
doesn't.
heard of it, but it like mechanically, it doesn't
It's
even
not a
work.
game. It is just angry racism by a white nationalist movement disguising itself as a church. It's not even a church. They don't even believe in a deity, by the way. Same energy as Satanism.
At least Satanists can be kind of funny occasionally.
Yeah.
Like the time that they got a statue of Baphomet put up.
So what you're
Oh,
saying is no thank you on that one. Fair enough.
No,
well,
thank you.
actually,
Like,
question would we even be allowed
yeah, like
discuss
that's the other thing with
Probably
that
not.
it's like,
Probably not.
do we really wanna put that sort of shit up on YouTube?
Probably not. YouTube would yeet it into the good point.
It's not even a yeeting thing. It's more like, do you really want to even give it attention?
Fair enough.
Like,
It's just kind of
knowing it
amazing they
exists
couldn't
is
even
enough to know
make a
it's.
game.
Yeah, it's amazing that they couldn't even make a game, but it's like, do you even want to give them the dignity of like calling it even remotely close to a game? Like, it's not.
Oh, you want us to actually look at Fatal? But we did a Fatal special.
We did
Oh,
a
you mean
Fatal up.
looking at the book?
We did Fatal.
Hmm. How about a compromise on Fatal? I have another book. It's called World of Cinnabar.
Oh,
Ooh.
that one. World of Cinnabar is a game where I would really love to play a session with the original author so I could understand what the fuck he wanted.
How about that? How about that as the compromise? Hmm. I'll have to think on this because I have 3 good candidates, and I do want to actually look at World of Cinnabar. The problem is my copy is not a high quality one, so it's not the easiest to read. But then again, World of Cinnabar isn't that easy to read.
I mean, if we have to dig in the dumpster bin for books, we could go and look at some of the older White Wolf titles again. I think that there is like one. I was about to say we could look at the Children of Gaia clan books, but I think you'd legitimately be frothing at the mouth.
Hmm.
So
We'll
just
muse on this a little bit later. I'll definitely put up the stream when we figure this out. For now, have an excellent night, everyone. And yeah, heartily recommend this demon setting. Make sure to get a copy of it on the. We actually link it in the description if you don't have it. One of the
Yeah,
cool things about the Dark Errors books is you can actually just buy the booklets, which are cheaper.
you can.
And
I would still recommend buying the whole core because it is just a better deal.
there's only like 2 or 3 I don't think are very good. So yeah, I
And
think it's worth it.
even then, they're still playable. Like we have not rated a single setting in here worse than playable.
And that's only because I really fucking hated the Battle of Clontarf.
Yeah.
So, also feel free. We have a Discord. You can leave a like on this stream. You can subscribe if you wish. Have an excellent night, everybody.